Hello everyone. Welcome to Women in Agriculture Web Summit. I hope I'm audible. Cool, awesome. Yes. So guys, we are having a very strong lineup today, and good morning everybody in America, and good evening everybody in Asia and Africa. Good evening. So we are having our first speaker already there, and we are proud to have a very strong lineup of some of the global change maker. These women, they have been there, have done it. And the whole idea of this web summit is that they talk about themselves, they talk about the stories of their success, their pain, and motivate a lot of young women across the world to become a part of agriculture ecosystem. So today we have Connie Bowen, who is the Director of Innovation and Investment at AgLaunch. She's passionate about distributing knowledge and inspiring inclusive, impactful innovation in our global food and egg system. She has been continuously tracking women in agriculture, more specifically women in egg tech. So Connie, without much ado, I would like to hand over the floor to you and look forward to a very insightful session from you. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me. And yeah, thanks all for tuning in. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. As Deepak said, I'm very passionate about increasing access for all elements of agri-food systems. Today, I figured I'll chat a little bit about something I've listened and tuned into some of the sessions earlier today, and they've been really interesting, that which I've been able to listen to. And I figured I'd kind of go through a little bit something that's very important to me, and I think very important to everyone involved in ag tech, hopefully, and that is farm-centric kind of innovation. But then we can kind of go into a little bit of discussion. Deepak, I'll keep it relatively concise. But let me just share this presentation here that I've got. Start at the beginning instead of the end. But yeah, like I said, I want to talk a little bit about farm-centric innovation, and I appreciate that this event is a little bit more around sharing the really cool stuff that people who happen to be women are working on, as opposed to what's it like to be a woman in ag. I think that's much more interesting. That said, I'm going to give a little bit more personal kind of intro than I normally do, because I think that I want to kind of tell the evolution of kind of my thinking, because I grew up in kind of the New York City suburbs in New Jersey, definitely never imagined that I would end up living in the Midwest or even living on farms in Oregon for a period of time. But that kind of pathway has given me an opportunity to see the importance and actually maybe gap in terms of farmer innovation and farmer involvement in innovation. So I figured I'd start with some fun, kind of quick about me. I like I said, grew up in kind of the burbs, got into startup land actually through developing kind of aeroponic food computer systems, was very early engaged very early in the kind of beginning, I guess, of the ag tech boom with the yield lab in St. Louis very early on. And actually was also dabbling in kind of more traditional tech venture capital investment, early kind of seed stage, but have always really had this deep passion for food and sustainability. And I always joke that kind of the marriage of a love of food and engineering, I'm an engineer as well, leads you to ag tech, I hope. But what I wanted to really kind of convey here is, you know, you can see me here like bucking hemp on a farm. I planted a hazelnut orchard, and then I'm on the other end of the shovel fixing an irrigation pipe. And I wanted to include that picture because, and that's a small part. That's when the whole started as a small situation. But I was fixing an irrigation pipe one day, and long story involving a lack of a pump. But it was a pretty rough situation. The irrigation guys couldn't come out. We were in the middle of blueberry harvest. It was dry. The blueberries needed water. we had to fix those pipes that week ourselves. And as I was doing that, I was thinking about all of the kind of companies I've heard pitch over the years about irrigation technologies. And the fact that we had top of the line equipment, but we were out there on our own because we're in a rural area. And it really helped me. I kind of had as I was bailing out a hole with buckets of water, I was thinking, okay, it's probably going to take longer to bring some of these irrigation tech products to market than you would think. And I deeply understand why. And I don't consider myself to be a farmer. I don't have that much on-farm experience, but I have just enough of a taste to know that it's hard, it's different everywhere, and it really matters that farmers are a part of ag tech innovation. And so that's kind of partially what led me to AgLaunch, where I serve as the Director of Innovation and Investment. So I work on our internal innovation projects, and I work on our kind of with some of our external vetting companies. We do a number of different things that I'll get in the weeds on a bit more later here. But I'm really focused on trying to understand better how we can more effectively integrate traditional agriculture with high-tech innovation and do so in a way that works for everyone and moves everything forward positively. So I wanted to set a quick kind of set the stage quickly. I'm sure that others have talked about this too. Ag tech investment continues to climb. It's exciting. There's a lot of food tech investment. I'm seeing a lot more kind of what I call coastal investors. Forgive me, I live in St. Louis, Missouri now. I work primarily in kind of the Delta region with AgLaunch. But my background is on the coast. And so there's this kind of interesting concentration of wealth and investment that's starting to be really excited by the clean tech opportunity that ag tech creates. And that's awesome. We definitely need more investment in the space. But it's important that the folks making that investment understand what they're investing in so that expectations can be aligned. And so, yeah, as you can see here, it's climbing everywhere. I want to kind of break it down a little bit by category too, though, to understand a little bit better. And these figures are all from Ag Funders investment reports. But I just wanted to take a look here and kind of point out that a majority of investment isn't going to what I call farm gate technology. So farm robotics, farm machinery. A lot is going to midstream technologies. You can see that on the leftmost column. That's over here. Though it tends to be a little bit further, a little closer to the consumer side and a little further from the farmer side. And I would argue that that is a real problem, because if you cannot connect the consumer end of the food system to the production end of the food system in a way that incentivizes everyone along the supply chain to, let's assume we all want to do better in some way, right? You've got a problem. And I think we actually do have that problem today. So I think, again, these reports, all of Ag Funders reports are always worth looking into. But my broader point here is there is a lot of investment flowing to ag tech, and that's great. There's also not very much on-farm adoption, and that's not so great. Because again, it has to kind of start, arguably it has to start at the input stage, but behavior change has to happen on the farm. And as you can see from this is what I think, study done in May 2020 about the 2019 season by Farm Journal's Trust in Food. And I share it with everyone all the time, because farmers just aren't, I won't read slides to you, but farmers are not using enough software. From this has improved probably a bit, but in 2019, 62% of farmers weren't using farm level data software, and 46% were storing their data primarily on paper records. And then folks weren't happy with what they have. There's not necessarily, we're not necessarily all on the same page. We talk a lot in agri-food systems about transparency being this objective end goal, and farmers don't necessarily share that, and that's kind of setting us up for a problem. And a lot of that, it ties back to profit, right? When you look at food dollar distribution, farmers do not get, and I should have clarified this from the beginning. I'm speaking largely from a US context, but farmers do not get very much of the food dollar. And therefore, there sometimes is a lack of incentive to change behavior, which makes sense, actually. And it leads to trust issues between kind of all parties. So again, this brings me to AgLaunch. I think we have part of the solution for this. I think there can be a lot of other similar, I would love to see similar kind of groups emerge, but we're a farmer network at our core. We're, like I mentioned before, based in Memphis, Tennessee. We've got partners in Iowa, we've got partners in Oregon, but we are connecting farmers with early stage technology companies. We are helping farmers to develop business plans to better value add that which they're already producing and help them gain access to new, and work with them so that we can kind of create new market opportunities. We develop innovation internally. So we've got a very interesting kind of data cooperative model called the Data Commons. We develop other kind of technologies and kind of consortium models. So we're working on creating a specialty produce smart contract system to link small and mid-sized US farmers to opportunities to market their specialty produce, their non-commodity specialty produce to institutional purchasers. And we're working on that in a consortium model along with the SEAM, Wallace Center, Foundation for Food and Ag Research, and others. And then we also work a lot with startups, external startups. So what we kind of end up doing, and we do that, and we think it's a win-win kind of for everyone involved. We've worked with a number of companies over the years at different stages, and we run a series of programs from boot camps to accelerators. We call it kind of our 365 program is probably our flagship program. And they're different than every other accelerator. We don't have a fund, we're a nonprofit entity. We do have a network of farmers, many of whom invest cash and time and energy into ag tech startups. We run a series of programming, and we, most importantly, I think, work with startup companies to design on-farm trials that can then be done over the course of multiple seasons. We generally set the bar at about 3 seasons, so we're not working with a contra season, so that's typically a 3-year relationship minimum. And we pair companies with farmers so that these farmers can really, highly progressive farmers, so that these farmers can serve as mentors to the company and really help them, again, to de-risk their innovation, to make sure they're building something that farmer wants to pay for, and to help figure out all the bugs. The way I look at it, farmers ought to be on kind of every startup's advisory board because they're the end user and they add value. I've outlined a couple examples here. There's some well-known companies, Rantizo, which is now a buyer-backed company, does aerial applications for drone spray. Stony Creek Colors is really cool. They're developing a full supply chain for natural indigo for things like denim and natural indigo dyes. And like I mentioned, we do some value-added stuff as well. I threw a Growing Acres farm in here. Alex out in Savannah, Tennessee, is working on developing a bunch of different sorghum varieties and figuring out kind of the how much vertical integration or cooperation can he do with his surrounding, his neighbor partners, essentially, to, again, capture the full value of new varieties of crops in the region. So just to quickly kind of outline how actually this kind of works and what the pathway looks like. Again, we have kind of a demonstration, what we call a digital acre, that is basically, it's actually 2.5 acres, but It's 2.5 acres with all sorts of fun tech stuff. It's the way we like to describe it. We track a ton of information so that all of our beans and sorghum and corn can be tracked using the most progressive kind of sustainability protocols, and we can test that out there. We just put all sorts of different sensors in there. We play with different robots in those, and we play with different applications, and that's where it really starts. That's very small scale research. Then as startups kind of scale up, and of course, these processes have to look different for different types of companies, right? We know, for instance, we're running a robotics challenge next season, so 2022 season. We know that the companies who are developing large, expensive robotic and ag equipment are going to be later stage companies with a very kind of clear idea of how this thing needs to work and what a trial needs to look like. That trial is going to look very different than, say, a software application that monitors tasks and workers and kind of helps to, is more of a workforce management system, right? Those are very different trials, and we have the flexibility in our kind of structure to insert technologies and companies along kind of the innovation spectrum in different components of our system. We do plots, we work with extension with a number of different universities in the area. It's particularly important to us. One key element of kind of the AgLaunch model as well is ensuring that the future of agriculture is diverse in all senses, and that includes crops, but also the people who own and farm and manage and profit from the industry, and that's everywhere from ag tech to on farm. We do have partnerships with the various historically Black colleges and universities as well. And then as we kind of continue to commercialize, we've got this network of progressive growers who are willing to work really closely with these different companies. We work to make sure that farmers are getting an appropriate upside for their investment of their land, resources, time. And we have partnerships in place in the state of Tennessee and are working on expanding this such that ag tech trials can happen and farmers can actually be reimbursed for the hard costs of those trials. So you can get paid trials. So that enables startup companies to get paid trials very early on. And we kind of do this all in the context of looking at, I would say, kind of the classic in vogue ag tech innovation things. We look a lot at soil health, new financial tools. Financial and profitability is always a really core thing to our Farmer Network members. And then we're also kind of trying to figure out value chains as how do we make traceability work for everyone, right? And so, like I said, I'll keep it pretty brief. This is really my last kind of point here, but if we don't include farms and farmers in the ag tech innovation conversation, it's like blindly, startups are kind of blindly jumping after a market that they don't understand. And that can be really dangerous for them and their investors. And it doesn't actually help to solve the problems we want to solve. And so the solution is easy, or relatively easy. It's not easy, but it's intuitive, I suppose. We've got to have farm-centered innovation. It enables farms to get tools that work. It enables farms to be more profitable and therefore be able to reinvest those profits into more technology. And it also enables startups to get customers, which is pretty essential for any company. It enables entrepreneurs to get a more diverse set of investors and advisors. And it enables investors to make more intelligent decisions when they ensure that farms and farmers are part of the decision-making process. So with that, I'll I guess chat a little bit with Deepak if you want, but I can stop share here too.
Yeah, sure. Connie, awesome. I wish I could have seen something like that 6 years back when I started my tech journey. So to just give the reference, when I started my AgTech company, that was my second company. Before that, I was into social media data analytics, sitting in your office, crunching data, creating big data analytics solutions, and life was okay. when I got into agriculture, the first lesson we got was that when we created this application for farmers in Indonesia, and I thought like this is like, Tinder for farmers. It was so glamorous, right swipe, left swipe, long press. I thought like, I'll get a UX award. The company will be like, winning so many awards for the beautiful design. And 3 months down the line, we get the feedback that it's not working. It's rejected by the farmers. And then the arduous journey of understanding farmers started. And today, like, I visited 34 different countries, worked with the farmers, understood their challenge. If I could have all those things given me in platter with AgLaunch, I would have saved a lot of time, effort, and money for sure. So now my first question to you is that what was I'll say that point of inflection for you to decide that you want to do something like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think, like I said, I've always been drawn to ag tech. I think I'm a huge nerd. I love food and I care about sustainability. But as I was kind of watching ag tech investment climb, I was also kind of watching. I was involved in kind of early stage investment on kind of a global basis with the Yield Lab at the time, and also in working with this Grape Arbor venture capital group, but working with more traditional tech investors who were starting to dip their toes in ag tech, which is a huge opportunity. But then if you look back at kind of like the history of clean tech investment and the bubble, I suppose, that kind of burst there back in the 90s, there are kind of a lot of parallels. And I think that I felt like, wow, I feel like there might be a problem here. It seems intuitive to me that there's some mismatch. And I guess I got that just from listening and asking questions of folks who are more directly involved in ag industry. And I thought, I guess I better learn more about this. And so I ended up working in kind of farmland investment for a little bit, and actually trying to spin out a company out of that myself. And, it's, as soon as you get one taste, so to set a little more context, I was living and working out in Oregon. We had with a farmland investment fund that was basically buying up inexpensive land and using regenerative practices to flip it and increase its value. And we had 6 properties out in Oregon. We were growing hazelnuts, blueberries, and hemp out there. Some stuff organic, some stuff conventional. And then this was in 2019. So the hemp side of things was very interesting at that point in time. We were one of the earlier kind of CBD movers. But we were trying to figure out, how do you pull more of the profitability onto our farms, because we're used to marketing everything commodity. And there's a 1,000,001 factors, but basically farming is really hard. I was pulling very long hours. We had I spent a little bit more time probably on farm than was intentional, just kind of helping out the team. And it's one of those things where it's easier to think about it from a high level and not really understand it. But then once you start to understand a single system, you're like, wow, this is so complex. Every single farm in this little county is different. And then we tend in kind of technology, or even, at our desk jobs, to lump all of agriculture as agriculture, or maybe we separate it into like row crop and precision and livestock. But that really covers up a lot of the nuances and differences between operations. And so to me, the hard part of ag tech is the ag side. So I guess, I don't know if it was a single moment, but yeah, that's kind of how it went.
Cool. So there is a lot of similarity in the thought process. In fact, now I'm a full-time farmer. So we are working on various projects in which actually we do agriculture. So from creating and selling technology, I'm the now user of technology. So we are cultivating crops like ginger, garlic, turmeric, moringa. So typically the foods which are not already controlled by the big corporations, right? So there is some play for us. So that's the idea, with focus of trying to grow food closest to the consumer, right? More native the food, better it is for the whole of ecosystem. So that brings me to my next question. which is also relevant to the topic of this web summit. As a woman, how challenging it was to, first of all, to break that glass ceiling of being in investment in agriculture, then getting into agriculture, and then getting onto the farms. 3 different stages. And I believe, like, at each stage, I think there would have been a big hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I consider myself pretty fortunate to truly, I have done some blind stumbling into things. I I definitely, again, I grew up in a neighborhood that is, everyone kind of works in Manhattan's financial district, and that's truthfully been helpful to me. I stumbled into venture capital through a kind of entrepreneurial fellowship program that I didn't know a ton about. But I was in, so I guess, like, to directly, so I definitely had, when I was studying engineering, I suppose in college, I was doing a bunch of kind of aeroponic systems, and folks may or may not be familiar with some of the early kind of food computer research, really centered at like MIT's Open Ag Institute, and AeroFarms was just kind of coming up then and was in my neck of the woods. And I will say that I definitely had trouble getting access to even kind of interviews and job opportunities in that space then. And while my partner, who I worked on all kind of the engineering projects with, who was a man, always got those interviews. But again, it worked out well for me. I stumbled into venture capital instead. And I definitely am usually the only woman in the room, which can be frustrating. I think, to me, I feel less personally challenged than, as the person who has a seat at the table, I feel it's my responsibility to create opportunities for myself, but for others. And I definitely observe time and time again women entrepreneurs being judged differently by investors, whether or not that's intentional. Oftentimes it isn't. And it's a huge problem, and I am gonna probably be working on it my whole career, and then the next generation after me, unfortunately, is probably going to be working on it too. So yeah, I would, and then on farm too, I end up in like pickup trucks a lot with guys, even thinking about some of the like HR challenges on farm, definitely from like relatively minor stuff like farm guys. I typically have been not in the management team of the farm. I've been kind of more on the fund management of that team, but definitely deal with things like male workers pinching female workers and harassing them and knocking them in trucks, and you have to deal with all of that, and it only happens to the women. It doesn't happen to the men. It's a real problem. But making the most of it, working on it. But
I like that attitude, taking on the chin and ready for the next punch. So that would summarize your career.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too, if it's okay, because you're talking about some of the interesting stuff you're producing, like moringa and whatnot. That to me is one of the most interesting kind of opportunities in agriculture right now. Like, we all, again, when going back to the disconnect between on-farm and supply chain, there does feel like there's this vocal demand for a greater diversity of higher nutrition, flavor, whatever, better marketed, I would argue, produce, right? But there's this, it's so difficult to develop a new supply chain. And, I was in hemp early. I have some understanding of the, we didn't really think about how to deal with this processing element. But there's that marketing challenge is huge. And that's something we're working on in the US context, but it's really interesting, and kind of like, I actually think in the Indian context, there's almost an opportunity to do some leapfrogging. And again, this is where I know a lot about the US farm context, and not enough, and just enough to oversimplify in different global contexts, which makes it easier to think about, right? But what we're working on is kind of a smart contract system to link up these special attributes, because in theory, you can get value and people want value for maybe a woman farm, this was produced by a woman-owned business. That might actually yield a premium. But right now, there's no way to really connect that farm seller and buyer. And usually the intermediaries kind of in between are the ones who are aggregating and marketing it. And so with the very niche specialty crops, though, there's a really interesting opportunity right now that I think we'll see a lot of kind of different tech moves in. And we're trying to do kind of the, what I would say is like the quasi-private public version of this tool that is accessible to, not profit driven, actually is accessible to small and mid-sized under-resourced farmers, as well as larger farmers. But I think that's like the most interesting space right now.
No, I fully agree with you. So because the challenge is that food habits are changing, the demands are changing. We are recalibrating a lot of things, and COVID has made it more urgent for all of us to identify a better source, more sustainable sources. And I believe that people would be ready to give premium for something which is like, healthier for them. And I strongly believe that actually, like, if somebody can sell you cornflakes for decades, right? And then with the smart marketing, you can at least sell some superfoods, which definitely have right nutrients.
Right. And then the challenge, though, becomes like you have to, somehow there has to be someone tracking that data early enough and like carrying it through the chain. And that's where you have to have, I think that farmers also need to work. We on the tech side need to work with farmers, but farmers need to work with other farmers as well, to make it so that they can actually invest in some of this stuff in a way that they control it. Because I think that is pretty necessary. I also wanted to make sure I saw Karen's question. It's okay, I'm going to mention quickly our kind of upcoming challenges. But we run our 365 row crop challenge every summer. We'll open up applications for that at the end of this summer. That's for early stage ag tech startups who want to work with row crop producers in our network, though not exclusively. We sometimes have a couple specialty crops. You can check out our website and portfolio to see what that looks like. And then we'll be doing a later stage challenge next summer focused on farm equipment and robotics specifically. And that will be a non-equity based challenge. We are working on kind of figuring out, one of the challenges here in ag tech too is there's a need for investment in companies that won't necessarily become unicorn status companies. And so how do we figure that out? Well, farmers are going to figure it out because they actually need the thing. And so we're working on some kind of different instruments that there will be more to come on that, but that won't be till next season.
No, I fully agree with you that, like, we have to support even those companies which we are pretty strongly believe are not going to become unicorn, because end of the day, few unicorns is not going to what is going to helps the agriculture sector. We need hundreds of companies or maybe thousands of companies which, like, are scalable, right? And scalable to the limit of, like, if even they are serving, say, 100,000 farmers or 200,000 farmers and profitable, I believe that's a good enough scenario to be in. To end the session, I would like your views on or your message for all those young ladies out there who want to get into agriculture, how you would motivate them, and all those men listening to us, what they should do to motivate these women.
I would say women are probably motivated enough. I think maybe just make sure that I think women should feel free to speak up. And I guess then ally kind of guys should feel encouraged to make space, and maybe when in a group setting, make sure that amplify women's messages and as instead of kind of talking over them. And again, just create opportunities for others. And yeah, I wouldn't. And then on I guess for young women, don't hesitate to reach out. Ag tech is a small world, and we're all pretty friendly. I have a pretty open door policy, and most folks I know do as well. So don't send a cold email, LinkedIn message, tweet, Twitter DM, whatever. People will probably help you out.
And yes, Connie is having an open door policy, which her LinkedIn also very clearly mentioned. So please reach out, all you awesome ladies who want to build a career in ag tech or even pure farming, she's the lady to reach out to because she has been on all sides of the tables. Thanks a lot, Connie. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. So guys, we are having a next speaker with us. She's Pamela Marrone. She's the executive chair and partner at Primary BioAg Innovations. She's an experienced business person and serial entrepreneur who is a thought leader in the egg biologicals industry, successfully bringing multiple science-based products to market and scaling 2 egg bio companies from founding to a consistent high growth revenue stage, including a NASDAQ IPO listing. So let's welcome her.
Well, thank you very much for asking me to speak about my journey, my lifelong journey, my passion of developing biologicals to increase sustainability in agriculture. So how did I get started? Well, I grew up in Southern Connecticut in the United States, in a very woodsy area, and just got so interested in insects. And my parents had a very large vegetable garden, and we built a pond when I was about 7, and I'd spend hours looking at the pond insects. And but the start that got me into this was the dogwood tree, which is right outside the kitchen window of the house that my father built. That tree is now quite large, but when I was growing up, it was small. And the gypsy moth caterpillars came and devastated that tree and most of the forests. And my father went out and sprayed a chemical, carbaryl, still on the market today, but heavily restricted here, and killed everything. And my mother went out, and she's an organic gardener, and she was furious because the bees, the lady beetles, the lacewings, all of the beneficials were killed as well as the gypsy moth caterpillar. So she banned him from ever using anything like that again. So he trotted off to the farm store nearby and bought BT, the biocontrol bacteria, the first ever commercialized biocontrol bacteria from microbes. And you see the crystals here in my photo, and he sprayed it. And I said, well, Dad, what do you think? And he goes, well, it's good for the environment. It makes your mother happy, but I'm not sure it works. Well, that is the story of my life and my career, and why I wanted to go into this, to create products that work and can transform agriculture. I was tapping into the microbiome way before it was trendy. So I was interested in microbes from just very early. Well, because of BT, what else is out there that can control pests? So just a little bit of my background. After graduate school, I went to Cornell and then North Carolina State University, got a PhD in both in entomology, and then was hired by Monsanto right out of graduate school. And they asked me to come up with a screening system for being able to screen microbe and microbial natural products against corn rootworm, diabrotica, which is was the biggest pest of corn at the time. And so they could find something to engineer into plants and kill corn rootworms. So I ended up, my biggest success actually was to develop an artificial diet to be able to do a high throughput 96 well plate screening, which of course then allowed everybody to find proteins that they engineered into corn to create genetically engineered corn for corn rootworm. And then I also had a project which was determining whether pests would develop resistance to BT once you engineered a single gene into a BT crop. And we proved without a shadow of doubt that without proper mitigation measures, the pests would develop resistance to BT very quickly. And so I started a working group that funded some research that led to the EPA regulations, the Environmental Protection Agency regulations in the US today, requiring that farmers set aside a certain portion of their farm that's not using a GMO seed because of leaving refuges for susceptible insects, so we can reduce resistance. Well, you know, that's another major project I worked on, and still today Many parts of the world are figuring out how to battle resistance. But I actually screened over 150,000 microbes at Monsanto looking for pesticidal microbes that produce natural products. Then when I left Monsanto in 1990, I set up Entotech, which was a subsidiary of Novo Nordisk, big Danish company, who wanted me to set up a unit here in Davis, California to screen microbes. So screened 55,000 microbes and developed a line of discoveries. They then sold us to our largest competitor in 1995, and I started AgriQuest. Screened another 22,000 microbes, discovered Serenade from Bacillus bacteria, which became a global standard for biofungicides, and the first breakout foliar biofungicide product, still on the market today. AgriQuest was acquired by Bayer. Crop Science in 2012. I left AgriQuest in 2006 and started up Marrone Bioinnovations and screened another 18,000 microbes and developed a very broad full line of products from microbes and extracts of plants. So the AgriQuest history is that in summer of 94, when I knew we were going to be sold, I conceived of the company and then got some co-founders. We put in our own money. We incorporated and then raised 2 rounds of seed monies from friends and family to start the lab operations and hired the first 3 scientists in sequence. The first one, Sherry Hines, came with us, and she discovered Serenade and became the flagship product. So way back when, in the early days, we discovered it. She discovered it from a peach orchard in Fresno County. One of our co-founders had a friend who was a farm advisor at UC that noticed that this orchard never got any diseases, and we found the bacteria there. And then used that discovery. We actually got some data on some vineyards, some high-end vineyards. Gallo, I had a friend, head of R&D at Gallo Vineyards, and Gallo and some of their operations, very large wine grape company. And we sprayed some grapes and got some beautiful photos showing how well Serenade worked on powdery mildew, and used that to raise the first round of venture money, which was led by Rockefeller and Company. They had a fund, now closed, but it's called the Odyssey Fund, that was funding, they were way ahead of their time, funding women, minorities, and environmentally and socially responsible businesses. Now that's all the rage, but back then that was one of the only funds then. So I did great, raised a lot of money, $60 million from the initial seed financing to Series F. And this is a venture capitalist dream. Investors love to see this uptick in valuation every single round. I did a round of financing every year. To put it in context, there was no internet back then. I found investors from a book, a hard copy book, National Venture Capital Association, and cold called hundreds of venture capitalists to find those who would lead the first round. Calvert Social Investments, the chairman, led me to a group called the Investor Circle, which led to Rockefeller. So it's very different today, where there's many, many more resources for entrepreneurs. But back then there was nothing, as I said, not even the internet. So everything had to be hard copy and much, much more difficult. But anyway, managed to raise round of financing, then was filing for the IPO to list on the NASDAQ, filed for the offering right before 9/11. Unfortunately, 9/11, that horrible terrorist attack in New York and Washington, and then the markets closed shut. I couldn't get the offering done, and the valuation of the company dropped precipitously simply because of that event. And then I had to find money because we had built up the company and needed to keep funding. We were not profitable yet. So unfortunately, an investor came in and what is called a cram down, and offered some very, very punitive terms, which pretty much wiped out my founder's stock. I left in 2006 to start at Marrone Bio. And then in 2012, the company was sold for almost $500 million in 2012. So went from a very low valuation during the downturn, the 9/11 downturn, to a way uptick and a successful exit. Unfortunately, my founder stock had been mostly wiped out and diluted, and so I didn't make any money on that sale, but a lot of other investors did. So I have some lessons here. Okay, so it's really important to raise money when you don't need it. Raising money always takes more time than you think. It took me 2 years to get the first round of money for venture money for Marrone for AgroQuest, and we lived on our own money during that time and some seed money. And you should always take more money than you think you need, because windows open and close. Founders don't want to get diluted, and even first round investors don't want to get diluted. But you've got to understand. Now, look. So after 9/11, you get the 2008 Great Recession. Then you have COVID. Okay, so you never know what's going to happen. So as an entrepreneur, you better take the money when the window's open and move fast to get it, and raise as much as you can get, and have a really good lawyer who can help you avoid some of the really punitive terms that can be thrown on you during the downtimes, like a full ratchet anti-dilution, which really was what wiped out my founder stock, or participating multiple liquidation preferences. And all money's not equal. I know entrepreneurs I know today, especially women entrepreneurs, are very, very attuned to having investors that are very much in sync with their personal values and their vision and mission of the company. And that's really important to do. So the Marrone Bioinnovations history, I started in April 1st, 2006, incorporated in June 2006, and just passed our 15th anniversary of incorporation last week. Oh, actually, it was this week, early this week, yes. And then we put in our own money, myself and a Julie Morris, who was a Harvard MBA. I think I needed a Harvard MBA because with a PhD, even though I was a very successful entrepreneur, a lot of investors looked at that PhD and then pigeonholed me into science only instead of a business person. So I brought in Julie Morris, who had worked at a tech company in Silicon Valley and had a Harvard MBA. And then two have since passed away in the last 6 months. My dear friends, Dick Dorff, a professor of management at UC Davis, Graduate School of Management, and Rich Rominger, a farmer and former Secretary of Agriculture in California and U.S. Deputy Secretary, formed the founding round. And then we raised $1 million in seed financing from angels and high net worth individuals, which converted into the Series A, March 2007. So you can see that the startup and the raising of the money was much faster this time around. I have more experience, and some of the investors from AgriQuest followed me into Marrone Bio, and then raised another $65 million in pre-IPO money before the IPO on August 2nd. So, what are some of the attributes of the ideal culture? I wrote this December 2005, just before I started Marrone Bio, as what I wanted based on what my experience was with AgriQuest. What did I want from Marrone Bio? A high innovation company. Ideas are embraced. People don't talk you out of new ideas. Fast, rapid, agile, low politics. Politics from big companies can kill you, can kill a startup. Team-oriented, leadership, coaching, mentoring, high productivity, confident but not arrogant people. People who can work with women, very important. People who care first about the mission and the vision, and looking for investors who are partners with you until the end and will be there through good time and bad. A great board, and have an honest and open environment. I would have to say at Marrone Bio, I achieved 90% of these. Not everything, and I'm not going to tell you which one I didn't achieve because I might be revealing something. But I'm really proud of the culture that we developed at Marrone Bio. So, how to get to an IPO? Well, you have investors on your board. They want to get an exit. You can sell the company or get to an IPO. There was a wide open window in 2012 and 2013. And they said, jump through that window to go public. So we had actually started planning the IPO all the way back in 2011 and had mapped out with the team, some photos you can see here, of every quarter, what are we going to achieve in order to get to the IPO? And we wanted to be number one in the industry, in the biologicals industry. What does that mean? Okay, financials, the micro cap, what's your market cap? What's your revenues? Are you profitable yet? Almost there with Marrone Bio in profitability, but have had a robust revenue growth, more than 30% compounded annual growth rate for the last 5 years. Brand recognition of the company and the product, exceptional customer stewardship, a robust product portfolio, and the top things that are job number one: develop a really tight and robust quality control for the products, own our own plant, get scalable capacity, have a strong pipeline of products, and have a plan for 100 million in revenue, and go to an IPO. And almost on the road to 100 million in revenue, not there yet, but have achieved most of what's on this thing that this chart that we mapped out all the way back in 2011. So the planning of the business and looking forward really helped get us where we needed to go. The IPO was the most breathtaking and exciting part of my career. My mom and her sister, my mom's now almost 95, my aunt's almost 90, came to the, and here's Richard Rominger here, my dear friend and founding investor. Without him, I would not have been able to create this company. And it was so exciting to take the company on the stock market. To now, the first company that people could buy a company with biologicals. But it was going great until 1 year after the IPO, our chief operating officer, I just promoted him. He was head of sales, promoted him to COO. Big mistake on my part. He abruptly resigned. We suspended any guidance, financial guidance to the street. And the customer then made us aware that he had done a side deal with their vice president, and it was not reported to either company's auditors. Okay, this is really bad when you're a public company. So we turned it over to the audit committee. The audit committee started an investigation, and it took 18 months to go through, the auditors to go through every document in the company that was subpoenaed also by the Securities and Exchange Commission. And I went before the SEC and was grilled for 3 horrible days. And ultimately, they decided that it was one bad apple who was arrested, charged with 15 counts of fraud, and has pleaded guilty and is awaiting jail time. And so it's been quite a roller coaster, as you can see from the stock price. So we went from IPO price of 12 and then follow-on price of 9, plummeted down to actually a 69-cent price, and a valuation of going from 300 million down to 10 million valuation. And we worked our way back up, recapitalized the company, announced some record quarters, but then and got a high when we recapitalized the company with new financing. And we converted some of the debt we had taken on. We had our largest shareholder at the time lent us $40 million to get through this period because we couldn't raise more money. Thank goodness we had such great investors. Again, lesson about partnering with great investors. And the investors converted 3/4 of their debt to equity. And look at what the COVID-19 did to stocks, to all stocks, not just ours. But we plummeted, but we still went from a 17 million valuation to 170 million valuation. The company's just under 300 million valuation today. But we achieved more than 30% compounded annual growth rate from those dark days of the investigation and restatement, and worked from a 0 gross margin up to 55% gross margin. Last quarter, the company had a 60% gross margin. So despite all of this stuff going on, we were able to continue to achieve what we wanted to do. And why? Why were we able to do that? Because we had a tribe of employees that with me believed in this company and in this mission. And my lesson is that if an employee does not believe fervently that biologicals will transform agriculture for the better, they're not a good fit, because it's tough times doing what we're doing. So there's a wonderful TED Talk by Seth Godin, The Tribes We Lead, about ideas we're spreading, about how a movement starts with little tribes. And any movement needs those stalwarts who start that movement and keep spreading it and spreading it and spreading it. Now with social media, you can. And we believe that biologicals now are at the tipping point, and it's a real movement with regenerative agriculture and carbon smart farming, and getting momentum. Biologicals are finally coming into their own. Hiring the wrong people. I did it. That's the number one thing that I now advise 7 companies, 6 founded by women. And number one thing for any company is hiring the right people. And I do believe in hiring slow, but firing fast, because if they don't fit the company's vision and mission and culture, they're not going to work out. So the hiring first for values and skills and experience secondarily is really where I've learned we have to do, because besides building something nobody wants, number 2, what can kill a startup is hiring poorly. Number 3 is also lack of focus. So some lessons there. But hiring is really difficult. It's easy to say, but it's just not easy to do, especially on the commercial side. It's very hard to find people on the commercial side who really can stick with it through thick and thin. So building and maintaining a culture and those values is very difficult. I'm off, you're an entrepreneur, you're a founder, you're off raising money and you're building business, meeting customers, but you have to constantly attend to the culture, or it can be harmed or destroyed by those that come in who are strong managers or an influential scientist or engineer and can move your culture in a direction you do not want. And every entrepreneur has this problem. And so you need some insight into how people are going to react in a crisis, and how your investors and board are going to react in a crisis before you bring them into your startup. That's also not easy to do. How do you interview for that? I've got don't have time today, but I do have a slate of questions that I do, and have a deeper dive than I've done in the past. And it's really important to get diversity in the company and diversity on the board, because the more diverse it is, the better the decision making, and the more robust and productive I think the company has shown to be. Because if everybody always thinks one way, because they only have one kind of background, the company's not going to be as productive. And I have found, don't hire jerks. There are a lot of jerks around, arrogant jerks. I have the best success with unselfish, team-oriented people who give of themselves. So one of the questions I ask in the interview process is, do you volunteer? Do you get what do you do outside of yourself? Do you give back? And finding, if you've worked in the military, or you've been in the military, or have worked on a farm, are also some things that also can get to your root values. One of the things that has been successful for me is to have backups to backups. I advise a number of startups, and some of them go down one path and they only have one thing that they're working on to get to the path. Like they're focusing on too few investors or pursuing just one investor. And what if that falls through? So I have always advised everyone to have a parallel path. So a plan A and a plan B, and work in parallel on 2 different tracks, because you just never know what's going to happen. And I have not failed, because I've always had backups and then backups to backups, especially when raising money. If the first pool of investors doesn't come through, I have another pool of investors and another pool of investors. And so it's really important to have that planning in advance, because too many ones I've known have had to pivot. Sometimes they pivot successfully, others have not. Now, going from a startup to scaling, and I've successfully scaled 2 companies to tens of millions of dollars, both AgriQuest and Marrone Bio. That is not easy to do in our industry. And there's a lot of companies that are anywhere from 1 to 10 million, but haven't gone the next scale. It's not easy. You have to have a blend of and maintain your entrepreneurial early stage agility, at the same time bring in more processes, more role definition, which can drag down and get more bureaucratic. And especially if you start hiring and or bringing in board members from big companies, then that's all they know. So it's really challenging to develop this and maintain this balance, because there's constant tension between those, I call them the citizens, versus the hunters. Those who want to establish their feet on the ground and live a nice, happy life, versus those who are always hunting and innovating and looking for something new. That the challenge between those two types of personalities can be very intense. So there's a great article by James Allen a few years ago from the Harvard Business Review called "Keeping the Zeal of a Startup as You Scale." And I urge everyone to read it, because it's about insurgents versus incumbents. And this is true for any company, but especially true for when a startup changes over time and goes from an early stage real entrepreneurial to a scaling company. And it's really hard. Why is so much innovation happening in startups? Because it's really hard to get the innovation and change the status quo from the inside. And insurgents always see the days ahead, and the incumbents always see that change as a threat. So that balance is really critical. And I think even for Marrone Bio, as Marrone Bio scales, it's really important to keep that insurgent mentality. So some of the success factors in scaling biological companies, I've done it twice. How did that happen? You know, a lot of common wisdom is develop a company around one technology and focus on that one technology or product. That is very difficult to do and scale on because of the competition in this industry. If it's a truly innovative breakout technology, like you've developed a new micro for fixing nitrogen in corn, like Pivot Bio, that may be the way to go. But in the biopesticide arena, a broad product portfolio across the full range of grower needs is really critical, because it's so competitive that once you start getting a little bit of market share in one market, the competition comes in. So you need a number of crops to go into, a number of products, and global market. It's always important. I think there's a lot of growth globally. So getting your feet on the ground in a number of places around the world can have you grow quickly and spark your growth. And your products have to be innovative, differentiated, and science-based. I can't tell you how many microbial biological companies, biostimulant and bionutrient companies come to me with another mix of bacillus or another mycorrhiza, or it's got to be truly innovative or different. There was a mycorrhiza company, Groundwork BioAg. Their investor came to me and asked what I thought about mycorrhiza. He said, I said, yeah, there's a place for it, but I want to see something truly different. Can you have a very robust, hardy strains that can survive and low cost manufacturing? Sure enough, there was Groundwork BioAg, and they got funded, and they have done really well. And I had a collaboration with them at Marrone Bio as to putting mycorrhizae on the seed, and the results were quite good. A lot of companies skimp on field data. You cannot skimp on field data. We're never, as a startup, going to have the kind of data that one of the big companies has, thousands of trials before they launch, but you need enough data to show what your product does. Grower demos are great, and you have to demo with growers and show how your product works in an integrated program in a block on their farm compared to their standard program. But you got to have a solid set of research data before you get to that demo, or you could do them. You can actually do them in parallel if you like to demo, but you have to go back and always get that solid data. It's important to find your early beachhead. Instead of you want to expand to a number of markets in order to grow fast. But that beachhead, in our case, was the organic grower. The organic grower is the early adopter, doesn't have the chemical tools, so grabs a new technology much faster. And then the studies I've always done, and some of the media publications have continued to do grower surveys. And a very recent one showed that more than 60% of growers in the United States still had low awareness and didn't understand the whole biologicals category. So we still have a lot of work to do as a company and an industry in creating awareness and education of biological tools. And there's nothing better than boots on the ground. You cannot create grower demand, pull it from the grower through the distribution channel without boots on the ground. And that's expensive, but you either have to partner with somebody who's going to do that for you or do it yourself. So I'll end up talking a little bit about what I'm doing now and then women in ag. Well, because of what I just described about how difficult it is to scale and some of the things you need to scale, I joined up with Roger Tripathi, the founder of Primary BioAg Innovations and Global BioAg Linkages, the consulting side. But Primary BioAg Innovations recognizes a really large gap from R&D to scale. With the bioag market growing at double digits and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars are being invested into R&D, however, few companies actually can and will successfully scale. Investing in that R&D, it's just very challenging. They find how challenging it is to cross that chasm and get the market adoption. So we've just set up a platform for commercialization where innovation partners, innovators who have a technology or some products realize that they're not going to have the wherewithal or the money to get the product to market themselves. So we've set up a platform to take the products to market globally. So we provide a unique commercialization platform for sincere innovators to commercialize integrated, sustainable, soil-to-shelf plant health solutions for farmers globally. And so we've got some products already from innovators and are pushing them out to global markets and have a group of business development partners doing that globally. Well, to just end up, it's the most exciting time to be in ag. Oh my gosh, there's so many startups. I can't even keep track of them, solving problems from farm to fork. You know, I put this slide together of the startups that are working in, you know, all the way from plant transformation, plant improvement, to inputs, to data, robots, automation, sensors, and then indoor ag and new protein sources and new foods. And I can't keep up. This slide is already old. And there's been more exits, there's more startups. So it's an amazing, robust time for startups. And I think a lot of folks, even during COVID, said, you know, I'd rather do a startup. And young people coming right out of school, instead of going to a big company, I'm hearing more and more and seeing more and more starting up companies. And there's a tremendous number of women who are starting up companies. I mean, it's amazing what's happening. I was alone when I started up my companies, but here's just some of the companies that are, there's many more that I could put on this slide, but there's some big names here of founders or women led on this slide. And they're having lots of success in finding money and moving their companies forward. So what keeps me going? Why do companies stay? And there's employees that have stayed through thick and thin at Marrone Bio. And why do more entrepreneurs want to start up into this space? Because we are going from a chemical-intensive agriculture to, yes, organic continues to grow. It's a global juggernaut, but to a regenerative or bio-intensive, ecologically based future. And so it's exciting to see, driven by what we've learned in COVID and climate change, that ag needs to change and it needs to become more sustainable. And my whole life has been spent looking at biologicals and how they can do that. Now biologicals, we're finding, can not only help farmers increase their ROI, but can also help them reduce their carbon footprint. So very exciting time. And I just am looking forward to seeing all the new entrepreneurs and especially women entrepreneurs in this space. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Pam. It was a pleasure to hear from you. Someone who has been there, done that. That's very important because that gives you a practitioner's approach rather than the theory. So thanks a lot for sharing your deep insight with all of us.
Thank you.
And
So after a very insightful session, we would love to invite our next speaker, Janice Huxley Janes. Janice is the Vice President of Harvest Moon Automation, a company which is creating a artificially intelligence-driven harvesting system to ensure the food which is harvested is ready to be put on your table. Janice is a result-oriented business leader and entrepreneur with expertise in commercialization of new technology innovations to drive revenue growth through strategic go-to-market plans. She has been an industry veteran with experience across multiple domains. I would like to invite Janice without taking much time. Floor is yours, ma'am.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Deepak. I'm very happy to be here. Here, let me just bring up my slides. Great. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Delighted to be here, delighted to share in this Global Web Summit for Women in Agriculture, really celebrating women's contributions and also celebrating agriculture and the rich set of opportunities, the transformations that are happening in agriculture and discussing ways that we can all contribute to this future. As Deepak mentioned, my name is Janice Huxley Janes, and I'm a co-founder of Harvest Moon Automation. We're a ag tech startup. We're based in Boston, Massachusetts in the United States, and we're focused on robotics and smart automation. Deepak suggested that I spend just a few moments discussing a little bit about my own journey and how I arrived at ag tech. I earned my PhD in electrical engineering and computer science at MIT. When I was there, I studied nonlinear optics and optical communications. But I found my interest in innovation, entrepreneurship, really growing during my PhD studies. And I took the opportunity to take courses at the MIT Sloan School of Management in innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology management. Upon graduation, I really wanted to bring together my skill set, my technical skill set, combined with my interest in entrepreneurship, and I went into technology and management consulting. At the time, telecommunications was undergoing massive transformation and disruption due to a number of factors, including deregulation, both here in the United States and in other regions of the world. And it was a wonderful time to be working in that area. There were many forces coming together. There were many industries coming together. We had a convergence of consumer electronics, cable television, wireline and wireless communications, internet, all coming together, allowing for the creation of new products and new markets. So I spent many years in consulting and advising clients on how to leverage their technology assets for market advantage and for strategic advantage. After a number of very happy years there doing consulting, I really wanted to join a product firm. I really wanted to take some of the ideas I had developed as a consultant and really bring them to bear in the marketplace, really bring them to fruition. So I joined a software startup, which was in its growth stage of development. And the company was involved in developing billing software. Billing software had always, of course, been very operationally important for telecommunications firms, but they took on new meaning, billing software did. It became more strategic because as firms evolved and market offerings evolved, it became really crucial to be able to package and bundle products and services together in unique ways. And really the billing system enabled that. So there was really an explosion, rather unexpected, I would say, in billing software. And we were able to leverage that. I was brought in to start and develop and grow the wireless communications part of the business and create and execute the go-to-market plan, which we did quite successfully and had built a nice company which was sold for $1.3 billion. Now, if we fast forward to today, with a co-founder, we've started a company called Harvest Moon Automation in the area of ag tech. Much like the telecom from prior times, agriculture and ag tech is undergoing a tremendous transformation. I would actually say the transformation is even greater than for telecom. We have larger forces and agriculture is arguably an even more important part of our lives, of our ecosystem. It's a more important industry and is fundamental globally around the world. So for many reasons, I have made the leap to agriculture and ag tech. It also, I should say, it really suits my values as a consumer. I value the food I eat and where it comes from and the quality of it. And I value the increased interest in sustainability and creating an agricultural environment that is protective and sustainable for our future. So let's look a little bit more at the massive forces that are impacting agriculture today. We can really categorize these into 4 main buckets. We have a technology push. There's an explosion of technologies. I know you just heard a lot about biologics. I'll be talking more about some of the IT kinds of technology advances that we've seen, but just a huge array of new technologies and advancements. We couple that with macro forces, market forces that are happening both at the consumer level and at the labor level. We add in regulations that are happening not only here in the United States, but certainly in other regions of the world that are having a great impact on how agriculture is conducted. And then finally, we have the effects of climate change. And we are seeing more and more what an important role that agriculture can play. We're seeing that it may have played in the creation of carbon, but more importantly, can play in the solution to dealing with carbon as part of our climate change initiatives globally. So let's unpack each of these different buckets in a little more detail. If we look at the technology push, there are so many new technologies. We have the growth in robotics and end effectors. We have a growth in AI and machine language, also in machine vision, tremendous growth in data science and the ability to have distributed sensors where we can collect large amounts of data across a field, across one farm, across multiple farms. And because of the growth in data science, we're able to take these large quantities of data and really create decision support tools for growers to better optimize and manage their business. We also have advances in communication so that we can have the Internet of Things and really have all of our devices on a farm connected. And then we have blockchain, which is going to be very, very instrumental in both food traceability as well as supply chain and logistics management. So many new technologies are happening that will greatly impact agriculture. And all of this is even separate from the biologics and biotech, which has its own tremendous set of impacts. Now, if you look on the market side, as I mentioned, there are probably really 2 categories within the market that are shaping agriculture. Certainly is the consumer, increased consumer interest in their food, in their quality of their food, in the source of their food and how it's grown and the environmental impact of the food. Increasingly, consumers are interested in plant-based foods. And then we'll add on top of that just a growing, burgeoning population that needs to be fed with high quality, nutritious food. We couple that now with looking at the labor, and in many parts of the world, including the United States and other regions, there's a real labor shortage. A lot of the jobs and for labor in agriculture are difficult and they're backbreaking. And they're the kinds of jobs that if we could automate would really be very amenable to automation and free up the human resources to do other kinds of work. So there's really great opportunity in the area of labor and labor savings for smart machines to augment what farmers and growers do. If we look in the area of regulation, we see lots of regulations. Again, much of this is happening worldwide. We see regulations in food safety. For example, here in the United States, the FDA has passed the Food Safety Modernization Act, and then it has several components to it, one of which that we're very closely following and relating to is the area of inspection in real time of crops at the time of harvest. This is particularly important for crops that are eaten raw, that are not processed or cooked before eating. So we have regulation in food safety. We have regulation in the use of chemicals, particularly in the area of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. In addition, we have an increasing resistance of weeds to chemical herbicides. So growers are very keen on finding other ways to deal with weeds. In terms of fertilizers, California, for example, is now limiting the amount of fertilizer that growers can use. Growers often use fertilizer not only to nourish the crops they're growing, but also as an herbicide. But as the fertilizer usage is limited because of the effect of fertilizer runoff into the water, growers are looking for other ways, again, of dealing with the unwanted weeds and the unwanted elements to their crops. So a great sense of regulation that's coming into play. There's also labor regulation. There, again, in California has a new minimum wage laws where the minimum wage is being increased over time up through year 2022. This is a good thing so that laborers in agriculture and in other sectors can make more money, can make a more appropriate wage for a living wage. But all of this has an impact on the grower and how the grower can apply resources to generate high quality crop for a growing number of people with all of these different pressures. And then we add in the final force here of climate change. The climate changes can be seen in terms of day-to-day weather events, right, and also longer-term weather events. So right now, California is in a drought yet again, and has difficulty with water supply. These impact farmers very, very immediately. But we couple with that an increased desire to conduct agriculture in a way that is truly sustainable and maintains and enhances our environmental and natural resources for future use, for future generations. We add to the concept of sustainability, regenerative ag, which I know you were hearing about in the prior conversation, which is great. And regenerative agriculture is really looking at the carbon cycle and the role of agriculture in that carbon cycle and the amount of carbon emissions from agriculture and reducing that and really using the soil as a means of sequestering the carbon dioxide and really containing the carbon in the organic matter and keeping that in the soil. So if you can imagine yourself as a grower at the center of this diagram, there's an awful lot of pressures and concerns that the growers need to think about. And these pressures impact their immediate day-to-day life and how they conduct their business, but also impact their vision of their future and where they want to go. So we formed Harvest Moon Automation to really help growers to do more with less. If you really think about all the different forces that I discussed on the prior page, if you really wanted to boil that down onto something very simple and understandable and sort of comprehensive, it's really that growers want to do more with less. They want to grow more. They want to grow at a higher quality with more nutrition, with greater sustainability. And they want to do this with less water, less soil, fewer inputs. This is a very simple concept, but very, very hard to conduct and practice. In Harvest Moon, we develop smart robotics for real-time inspection and precision selection of crops. And in doing so, we help growers to do more with less. We're very focused right now. One of the areas of focus, I should say, is in the area of leafy greens. So we'll talk a little bit more about our efforts in that arena. Here I'm showing you a gorgeous leafy green field in Spain. And here is a traditional leafy vegetable harvesting system. As you can see, the harvester will come down the path and will essentially harvest everything in its path. It is not selective. It is automated, but not selective. Today, the selectivity is done by human labor. The typical growing cycle for leafy greens is about 6 to 8 weeks. During that time, about midway through, The human labor will help, will inspect the fields and will look for damage, contamination, disease, and foreign materials, and will remove those items from the field. This is usually done at least once during the growing cycle. It's often done several days before harvesting. And then again, on the day of harvest, ahead of the harvester, there will be people looking for additional debris, damage, disease, and contamination. And this process is time consuming and costly. And we wanted to work with growers to find a way to add intelligence to their traditional harvester. So we've designed a module called Inspect and Reject, and it turns a traditional harvester into a smart harvester. The module can, as we discussed, both inspect the crop, but also in addition to inspecting and providing all that data to the farmer, we can take an action. Farmers often say to us, we love the data, but we want some action. We need some immediate result. And the action here that we can take is rejecting the unwanted crop or debris. By this means creating a higher quality crop. Our device is a smart implement, and this is a really important part of our offering. We purposely chose it to be an implement so that it can be attached both to a traditional harvester or to an autonomous harvester in the future. Automation and technology is moving very rapidly. We wanted to focus on what we're good at, which is and we allow the autonomous vehicles to develop by tractor manufacturers and harvester manufacturers. We focus on the actual implement and the farming functions. And our implement is independent of how it's propelled. This really allows growers to adopt new technology at their own pace. If they want to keep their existing hardware, they can do that. If they want to migrate to fully autonomous, they can do that as well, and we can work with them. With our solution, growers are able to achieve improved safety. As part of the Food Safety Modernization Act of the FDA, the guideline is that the food is inspected in real time at the time of harvest. This is particularly crucial for looking for something such as contamination, which can happen truly at any time. And with our module, growers are able to do that very efficiently and effectively and quickly. We also can help improve crop quality by lowering the defect count. And we can lower costs in a number of ways. One way which we can lower costs, which was really a bit of a surprise to us, and it really highlights the importance of having partner growers. We really have partnered with the growers to work and develop this solution for them. And we learned from our partners that the growers will set specifications for their fields. And if a field is out of specification, it generally is not cost effective to harvest the field, and the field will be plowed under at great cost to the grower. By applying a solution like ours that can go through the field and eliminate the unwanted crop and the unwanted debris and contamination, we can bring a field back into specification, which can then be harvested, and the high quality crop within that field can be harvested to increase yield. And our growers have been very delighted with that aspect of our solution. Certainly costs are also lowered by lowering the cost of having labor have to go walk through the fields to hand inspect. And another really important feature is that our solution is chemical free. There are no chemicals used, which is very important for organic growers and for sustainable agriculture in general. We find certainly organic growers need to be chemical free, but more and more conventional growers, particularly in leafy greens, are, if not organic, nearly organic, and they will tell us that that's how strict the regulations are now. So let's delve a little more and see how this looks. Our solution is really comprised of robotics coupled with proprietary software algorithms and machine vision and innovative mechanical design. And through all these mechanisms, we're able to achieve the inspection and rejection. And here I'm showing you our system inspecting contamination. Here's in the form of bird droppings on the vegetation. We're able to see the bird droppings, and then through our vision system, and identify it and locate it, and then reject it at the time of harvest. And it's really important, particularly with contamination, to find this early. If contaminated crop is allowed to enter the product stream, it can contaminate the downstream product. If this happens, the entire system will need to be shut down and everything will need to be cleaned at great cost of time and money. And so growers don't like to do this. They certainly do it if they see contamination. It's a very serious problem. But anything that can be done to find that contamination early and not contaminate downstream product is really beneficial. Here I show an example of detecting disease. Here we have downy mildew, which manifests as yellow spots on spinach leaves. Downy mildew can be a really big problem. It can come and go. When it is there, it can often be omnipresent and really be a big problem and cause field to be out of spec and therefore need to be plowed under. So the ability to find the downy mildew, detect it and locate it and reject it at the time of harvest is really crucial for a lot of growers. And here is a final example. We show a foreign object. Here it's a piece of plastic. We're able to identify it and eliminate it from the harvest. There are all kinds of foreign objects that need to be identified, certainly rodents, insects, bits of debris, all important to be removed from the final product. So here's what our solution looks like. You can see the module is here in front, the inspect and reject. It can attach to any harvester. In this case, it's attaching to a harvester produced by Valley Fabrication. They're based in California. And the module allows the harvester to run at its typical speeds of 2 to 3 miles per hour, or put in crop terms, about 10,000 pounds of crop per hour. I do have a video to show you how this is working. I'll just set this scenario up for you. You can see that it's not very light in this picture. In addition to being cloud cover, it's fairly dark. Quite often, growers like to harvest the crop in the dawn or pre-dawn hours because it's cooler. And when it's cooler, the crop stands up more and is much easier to harvest than when the crop gets hot and it can be limp and fold over and hard to harvest. Our solution can work regardless of ambient conditions, whether there's bright sunlight or pitch dark. And now I'll show you it in operation as they're harvesting the leafy greens. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me go back. There we go. The green light shows that our module is on, and there's a blinking red light. There it goes. It blinks every time a crop is being rejected or debris. This is a very clean field, but you'll see it there again. So you can get a sense of when something is being rejected. As I mentioned, this happens to be a pretty clean field of leafy greens that we're harvesting in this case. But again, it's the module is easily attached or detached, and the harvester works as usual for the grower. And here we show the results. We can see this was spinach, baby spinach that was being harvested. And there was a lot of downy mildew in this field, and we're able to detect it, locate it, and reject it at the time of harvest, and increase or decrease the defect rate or increase the quality. In this particular case, we were able to take an out of spec field for a client and bring it back into spec so that they were able to harvest it, which of course was quite a great savings for the grower. Okay, so we've talked a lot about inspection and rejection as a way to create a smart harvester for leafy greens. There are other times when rather than rejection, we actually want to select, but we want to select with a gripper. This can be very true for selective harvesting of specialty produce. And the type of gripper that's required is really very specific and has very detailed needs. We really need a gripper that is human hand-like. It needs to be adaptive. It needs to be very agile and with a slender projection so that it can reach in amongst the plant, the different plants. It needs to be selective to be able to select the right berries from the not ripe berries, be able to find the berries under the canopy. The gripper needs to have variable strength and speed. And of course, low cost, rugged, and reliable. And I would actually also add here, it needs to be able to be washed down. Quite often, especially for specialty produce, the crop being picked and harvested is eaten raw without processing and therefore needs to be clean. So everything needs to be washed down capable. The other area of rugged, making the device rugged cannot be underestimated here. It's really important. Agricultural field environments are some of the harshest environments that equipment needs to work in. You have bright sunlight, you have wind, rain, mud, dust, dirt, sand, and vibrations. And you can have all of this happening for your solution at different times. So the ability for this device to be very rugged is really important. If you were to go to, say, Mastercard catalog and look for a robotic gripper, you would find over 1,000 grippers available for purchase. But truly, there are none on the market today. None of them can really meet the needs for food and agriculture and the harvesting of fragile produce. So we got to work. And Harvest Moon is developing an adaptive robotic gripper. We have garnered small business innovation research grants from the NSF, National Science Foundation, and most recently, right now, currently with NASA. Our design and development is a gripper that can grasp both fine and or fragile items. The grip can be agile with variable force, and of course, rugged, low cost, reliable, and wash downable. There are a number of applications. Certainly, we've been very focused on food and agriculture, but we are currently working with NASA, who has a different set of applications, and I'll share that with you. There are also applications in e-commerce, and in particular in industrial applications, and in particular for harsh environments. So let's think a little bit more and discuss the different kinds of applications. If we look at food and agriculture, as I mentioned earlier, there are many applications for the selective harvesting of fragile produce. And this can include, and by the way, today, currently for certain crops, because the labor is so tight and so difficult to find, crops can often stay in the field and not be harvested at all. This not only is a great loss of revenue and income for the grower, but it's a terrible waste of food. And food waste is a big deal, a big issue that growers are trying to manage going forward. So the ability to automate the process of selective harvesting of specialty crops is crucial. And these crops can include strawberries, table grapes, tomatoes, peppers, avocados, and a whole host of other high-value crops that require selective harvesting with specialized grippers. And it's not just the harvesting, which is crucial, but also in the food processing. Once the food is harvested, the crops, they are graded and then they are often packed in clamshells. And all of this work is quite frequently done by hand in a food processing facility. And these grippers could also be applied to those applications as well in the food processing facility. All of the handling of these fragile produce could be done with these types of grippers. Now, NASA, of course, has a very different set of applications. NASA is planning to launch an orbiting facility called Gateway, which will be positioned near the moon. This facility will be unmanned for about 9 months out of every year. Because of that, all of the equipment in the facility will need to be maintained robotically. And to maintain such equipment, there'll be a lot of electrical equipment, electronic equipment, fluid-based equipment. There'll be a lot of work that's needed to be done, which will require handling connectors, connecting, disconnecting connectors from cables. There'll be these connectors, you'll need to find them from within a mesh of cables and tubes and wires and other connectors. And it's a really pretty important task. And this gateway is really an important part of the overall missions to Mars. So this technology is crucial for NASA. It's crucial for food and agriculture. And there are many other applications, particularly in the area of industrial environments. In the near term, we see this as immediately important for environments such as nuclear power plants, work with which we have some familiarity. And those are environments where you really don't want to introduce human beings, and yet there's equipment that needs to be maintained. Again, the optimal solution is robotic maintenance and the use of agile adaptive robotic grippers to do the same kinds of maintenance or similar to what would be required on the NASA Gateway, for example. And then if you really think about it and envision for longer term, factories and manufacturing facilities are going to move to a model whether they are self-maintained. There will be robots that are self-actuated, that are roaming the facilities and are keeping the equipment maintained, and that will require hand-like adaptive grippers that are rugged, reliable, and low cost. So we see many near-term applications for this gripper and also many longer-term ones as well. So if we think about the future of agriculture, it's obviously very bright, lots of opportunities. There's quite a push towards sustainable and regenerative agriculture. And there are really many technologies that will come to play in helping that vision of sustainability and regenerative come to fruition. There's the whole area of biotech, which I haven't really touched on at all. There's ag tech, blockchain, internet, IoT, Internet of Things. And we focused here today particularly on ag tech, the smart robotics and automation. And the beauty of this particular segment is all of the near-term benefits that can be achieved for growers and helping them solve very near-term, very real, urgent problems with labor, with cost, with meeting these other regulatory constraints, and helping those growers enhance their quality, their cost, their yield. But ag tech also helps position these growers to help them realize their vision for their farm and how they want to be in this future world of sustainability and regenerative ag. But through all this, growers really face a myriad of choices and risks and trade-offs. And this is really the challenge. And I say through all this, with all of the opportunities that are available for women and all entrepreneurs to become more involved, the opportunity really is quite specific. We need to create innovative solutions that really meet the growers where they are today, provide them value today, and then help enable them to meet their future. And I thank you very much. Again, my name is Janice Huxley Jens. If you're interested in Harvest Moon automation, please check out our website at www.harvestmoona.com. And there's the ability to interact with us there. Please do. We look forward to your inputs and your thoughts, and we'll be sure to get back to you. And thank you so much. If there's time for questions, I'm happy to answer any. I'm not sure if I've gone over or not, Deepak. How did I do?
Yeah, you have gone a little bit over, but it was very insightful and not an issue at all. In case we have few questions, I'll definitely share with you, and we'll find a way for audience to get those answers. Thanks
Very
a lot,
good.
Denise. It was a pleasure having you as our speaker. And our next speaker is Jenette. Jenette Ashtekar. She is Vice President of Product Management at CIBO. She's an entrepreneurial scientist and agriculture technology innovator, experienced in translating and delivering novel IP into real-world solution. Jenette is expecting, and hence we would be sharing a video recording done very recently with her. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeanette Ashtekar. Thank you so much for inviting me today to speak. I'm really excited to be here around such a distinguished and very international group. It's exciting to learn about what's going on in agriculture and with women in ag all around the world. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and talk a little bit about CIBO Technologies, the company that I work for. that's really focused on regenerative agriculture and scaling regenerative and sustainable agriculture around the world and in the US. So I have been at the company CIBO for about 4 years. I head up product management, and so really focusing on software products. And my background is in soil science. So I like to say I've kind of done everything in soils, from digging holes and jumping in and taking samples and processing through the lab, all the way towards writing algorithms to predict soil properties like carbon at multiple scales. And so what really got me into soil as an undergraduate at Ohio State University, I took an introductory soil class as part of my studies in environmental science. And I was really just fascinated with the way soil developed these different layers in it and different structures. And as you moved into different environments, the soil looks incredibly different. And so I come from kind of a suburban background. So I grew up in Ohio, which is an agricultural state, but I grew up in a region that doesn't have a lot of agriculture. And so I wasn't initially drawn to soil because I come from a farming background. I was drawn to soil because I found it so incredibly fascinating. Really, soil starts out as some sort of, unconsolidated rock material or ash from a volcano, or things that are coming from rivers, and over thousands of years it evolves into this incredibly beautiful system and structure with all the different layers and colors. And I really wanted to understand what drove making that happen, why soil evolved the way it does. And so I focused on what's called pedology. And pedology is kind of the fundamental study of the form and function of soil. So how did soil form? What is it made out of? How did it evolve over time? How do you map it? How do you name it and classify it? And as part of that, I started to really gain an understanding of the importance soil has to our society and to our agricultural systems. And this is where my interest in agriculture really started to evolve. So instead of thinking about soil kind of in the abstract as this amazing substance that's made out of biology and chemistry and physics all coming together, I started thinking about soil as a medium for food growth and to support societies around the world, and really how that impacts, agricultural ecosystems. And, in the United States, farmers are actually taxed based on the soil type. So they pay more property taxes for a better soil type. So as part of my master's degree, I did a lot of work focused on crop modeling. So how can we test different types of crop models, mechanistic crop models where we're simulating the day-to-day growth of a plant? How do we test them to determine if they're capturing the variability of soil well enough? And my research was actually funded by the Department of Taxation in Ohio. So after completing my master's degree, I went to work for the tax department. And if anyone's worked for a state tax department before, it's not the most exciting place to work. But I did get to talk to a lot of farmers. And this was really my first experience outside of the academic world, working with the farming community. And, it really showed how relevant soil is to the day-to-day life of farmers and our agricultural system. And so I would, talk to growers all day on the phone who were angry about their tax rates because the state had just recently increased taxes for, the entire farming community across the US. And I was really taken aback by how, these soil surveys that were completed in the U.S. starting in the 1950s all the way through the 1990s were being used to assess tax rate for growers, in the 2000s. And it drove me to want to create better soil data so that, I knew how, accurate or inaccurate a lot of these maps were that were being used to assess taxes, but I don't think the growers really did. And so I wanted to work towards making better soil information to kind of benefit growers, as well as to help inform better management decisions. So the way soils are kind of traditionally mapped and classified around the world and in the US is kind of based on how they look the same. You know, these soils look similar, they have similar structure, they have a similar pH, and it's not really based on how they perform in agriculture or what they're best used for. And so I started working with a professor at Purdue for my PhD, really focusing on what we call functional soil mapping and soil classification. And the idea is to classify soils and map soils based on how they function similarly, not based on how they look different. And in the process of doing my PhD, I wound up developing some algorithms to be able to predict soil properties using a very small number of samples. So kind of a big issue, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes when I talk about regenerative agriculture and soil carbon. A really big issue in soils is sampling, because it's costly, it is very time consuming. Having been a graduate student collecting thousands of samples in the field, it's not the most enjoyable activity all the time. And so I did a lot of work focused on, okay, how do we choose the most optimal places in the landscape to select a soil sample so that we don't have to, go out and take a large number of samples. And traditionally, soils have been sampled kind of in a grid, where you have a systematic grid, and every 10 meters, you're going to go take a sample. So what I focused on was developing algorithms really based on the shape of the landscape. So digital elevation models are able to tell us, the elevation across a farm field and how it changes. And those changes in elevation are really driving water dynamics across the field. So in a low spot in a farm field, water accumulates, and those are the areas that are typically darker in color because there's more carbon in the soil. And so what we want to do is make sure to sample all of these different environments in the field. So we want to sample the low spot and we want to sample the high spot. And that's kind of, in general, how we think about doing kind of more a smart soil sampling technique or a zone-based sampling technique. And so as part of that, once we took the samples, we then develop algorithms to be able to predict the soil properties. So we maybe have 10 soil samples in a large farm field, but we want to have a high resolution map of the entire field and its properties at different layers. And so a lot of the work I did was around in developing algorithms to interpolate between those sample points to come up with high resolution soil maps. And at the time, this was in the late 2000s, really what was becoming a huge topic was soil carbon, and a lot of the funding and interest was associated with carbon in soils. And what's interesting is at the time that wasn't really focused on climate change. It was more focused on just understanding that carbon is great to have in the soil. It has a lot of amazing properties. It promotes soil productivity, it helps with water retention, and we just wanted to know where all the carbon was. And so a lot of my work, again, focused on predicting soil carbon. I had some great opportunities to travel around the world and work kind of in the dry corridors of Central America, making very large scale maps of entire countries. And then I also got to work in the small scale, in the precision ag world of developing a 10 meter or 5 meter high resolution spatial soil map of carbon for farmers. And that can be used for things like zone management. And, kind of what happened was the university put in intellectual property on a lot of the research that I did with the professor I worked with, Dr. Philip Owens. And because of that, it really spurred us to start a company. So we did a small startup company called Ag Soil Analytics, the professor and I, and had the opportunity to commercialize these algorithms with a very large seed company. And that was just an amazing experience. So Purdue University is located in Indiana, in a very small town in the Midwest, you know, surrounded by corn and soybeans. And, you know, they have a very vibrant startup community, though, and put a lot of effort on commercialization of academic intellectual property. And we had, you know, such a great experience at being able to start a company, then magically find a very large seed company to pick up our technology. And then, you know, really what happened was I caught the startup bug. And I went from, wow, I did some math, you know, in a computer, and now it's in a grower's combine and he's using it to do his variable seeding rates. And that was, you know, a big aha moment for me. And prior to that, I wanted to stay in academia, and I couldn't anymore. I said, I have to go out there into the world and I have to do this again, because kind of coming up with a new technology out of nowhere and then making it a reality was what I found really drove me. And happily, I have, you know, a background in soil and carbon and agriculture, so I can apply, you know, my really deep passion for new technology and turning an idea into an actual end product to agriculture and to climate change. And so I ran into CIBO Technologies and joined the company and moved kind of from a small town in Indiana to Boston, Massachusetts, and have kind of just been moving forward ever since. And it's been a great ride. Yeah, so that's kind of my background in general. And I'm happy to share a little bit of information about CIBO, and then also talk kind of about soil carbon markets and regenerative agriculture, which is becoming a huge kind of buzzworthy theme in the past couple of years. And that's really where CIBO is focused, and that's where a lot of my attention has been focused for the past year and a half, 2 years, really trying to demystify carbon markets and soil carbon and understand what role they're going to have in the future in our agricultural systems, and hopefully driving some climate change mitigation. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen. All right. Just a little bit of background on CIBO. So CIBO was founded by a company called Flagship Pioneering, and this is the same company that actually founded Moderna, the vaccine company. So we're not quite as large or influential or impactful as Moderna yet, but who knows? We'll see what happens one day. And we were really founded with the idea of leveraging technology, scaled software technology, to unlock a deep understanding of land and agricultural systems. So we're a software company. We develop tools for agriculture, but not for precision ag. So this isn't about, as a grower, tell me everything I need to know about my field to better operate on it. It's more like, tell me everything I need to know about my neighbor's field, or what would happen if I changed a practice on my field. And a lot of the motivation behind that is agricultural land is quite opaque, and agricultural land transactions are opaque. So unless you've operated on a piece of ground for a number of seasons, it's really hard to understand its yield potential and variability. So we want to give that information before somebody makes a big investment in adopting new management practices. So we're really small. We have about 40 people. I think it's incredibly fun working in a small company. The vast majority of our company are PhDs, really focused in science, you know, crop sciences, data science, soil science, and then also a large number of software engineers. And we leverage a technology called SALIS. It's a mechanistic crop model that we license out of Michigan State University, and we use that to come up with information about things like yield potential, historical yield, carbon sequestration, nitrogen leaching, and a lot of really compelling information about our ag systems. And so what we've really been focused on for the past, couple years is regenerative agriculture. And so coming from an ag background, this is what we traditionally would call conservation ag. It's kind of just taking off under this kind of new branding and expansion of regenerative agriculture. And so our mission today at CIBO is to bring, the technologies and information required to farmers and to the companies that work with farmers to help expand the adoption of these regenerative, sustainable agricultural practices. And the reason is because they promote healthy soil systems, and healthy soil systems promote resilience to climate change. They promote food security. They promote better economic returns to growers. And so some of these practices include things like reduced till or no till. So, fundamentally keeping the soil in place instead of mixing it up and exposing it to oxygen, which causes carbon loss. It includes things like reduced chemical usage, so using less industrial fertilizers. Largely, at least in the US, we over-apply fertilizers because we're, have this great economic advantage of being able to go out and buy enormous amounts of fertilizer. And so using less or using better or different types of fertilizer. A big trend that's happening now are things like microbials and biologics and different types of sustainable fertilizers. That'll be really interesting to see what happens over the next, n number of years related to these new green fertilizers. And then cover crops, that's a really big one. So again, keeping the ground covered and increasing crop diversity, switching up rotations, having different crops in the field at any given time. And really, these practices have many benefits, and a big piece of them is increasing or maintaining carbon within soils. And so the reason to go do these practices isn't just because, I'm going to get carbon in the soil and I could potentially sell it on a carbon market. I'm going to improve the agricultural system. I'm going to promote long-term sustainability. But kind of the buzz that's been happening and the hype that's been happening over the past couple of years has really been around carbon markets, and in the US specifically, voluntary carbon markets. And so we don't have, national legislation associated with regulation around how much growers can emit, or really very much around how much companies can emit in terms of greenhouse gases. And so a voluntary market has arisen. So when we see companies, like Microsoft or Starbucks, say that they're going to reduce their emissions significantly, they either have to, in the case of Microsoft, they have to go out and buy carbon offsets from somebody who's sequestering carbon from the atmosphere, or in the case of someone like Starbucks who's not buying offsets, they need to actually reduce their Scope 3 emissions, or the emissions that take place within and around their agricultural supply chain. And one of the ways that this is starting to materialize of how you can meet these reduction goals is to promote the adoption of regenerative practices and then quantify how much carbon is being sequestered in the soil because of these practices and how much emissions are being avoided. So because I'm doing these better practices, I have a less overall carbon footprint, and I could potentially be drawing down carbon from the atmosphere, turning it into something like a cover crop, incorporating that cover crop into the soil where it will remain for some amount of time, and help mitigate the effects of climate change. And so, the reason, again, that's driving a lot of the attention is that there's potential money to be made in carbon markets. Today, the price for soil carbon is around $20 a ton. You can imagine generating on an annual basis, if you go from no regenerative practices to some regenerative practices like no-till or cover, anywhere between half a ton to a ton of CO2 equivalent in carbon credits. So it's a potential revenue stream for growers. It also builds resilience into our ag system. So having more carbon in the soil promotes better productivity. So the soil is better able to hold on to fertilizers and chemicals so they don't leach out and go into waterways. And we have significant issues around the world, and in the US related toward the leaching of nitrogen and phosphorus into water systems, which have actually caused massive, large dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico where fish can no longer be harvested, all because of the agricultural practices in the Midwestern United States. And, additionally, carbon in the soil creates better soil structure. And so what happens is in a flood, we have these really big macro pores if there's a lot of carbon, so water can drain out efficiently. But in a drought, we have a lot of micro pores, so those micro pores hold on to the water, and we're more resilient to drought as well. And the reality is that climate change is occurring, but also it has already occurred. The climate has changed, and it's evident around the world with increase of severe weather events. So flood and drought are here to stay, and we need to build agricultural systems that are resilient to them, while at the same time trying to decelerate or stop the expansion of more climate change. And so in ag-based carbon markets, they're not real yet. There's a lot of hype and a lot of talk, especially in US agriculture and European agriculture, about these things. But there's actually not a lot of ag-based carbon that's been generated and available for sale. It's largely a really big story right now. Lots of growers are trying to understand it and sign up for it and get involved in a carbon program, but there hasn't actually been a large number of financial transactions. And we want that to happen. We want these markets to materialize, but right now there's kind of a lot of issues holding it back that the industry is trying to overcome. And one is that soil carbon is really hard to measure. When you have to take things like bulk density samples and core samples, it can be expensive, and they're also not precise. If you take a soil sample, put it in 3 bags and send it to 3 labs, you get 3 different results. And so we need to be able to have low-cost sampling and also leverage models to quantify the amount of carbon in the soil. Another thing is that farming decisions are made annually. As particularly in the US, land is leased on an annual basis. So most farmers don't own the land they're operating on, and so they can't sign a long-term contract. So in carbon markets, there's this concept of permanence. The carbon's always going to be there. And in an agricultural system, it's really hard to say the carbon's always going to be there, because weather changes can affect carbon. Or if a grower, can't perform a certain activity in a year, that might result in the release of carbon. So for example, let's say it's really cold and the cover crop doesn't emerge. Then the grower would no longer, be eligible for the carbon market. And so we need to have markets and systems that actually function the way agriculture functions. Growers need to be able to make annual commitments and not be penalized for things outside of their control. A really big issue in ag-based carbon is that today it costs more money to produce a ton of ag carbon than it sells for. So the price has kind of just honestly randomly been set around $15 or $20 for a ton of CO2 equivalent, which is what's kind of bought and sold on the carbon market. And in order to produce half a ton to a ton, it typically costs really around $30 to $100 an acre. And it'll sell, for maybe 20 or less, and the grower takes a much smaller cut of that. And so it's not a sustainable economic system. If we want this to scale, the price of carbon has to go up, or growers need to have access to more capital to fund the adoption of these new practices that lead to the carbon sequestration. And then there are just so many players popping up in the ag carbon space, and everybody wants to have a story related to it, and it's creating a lot of uncertainty with growers who don't know, what program should I sign up to, what practices should I be doing, should I get involved, should I sign a contract, and it creates uncertainty in the entire ag ecosystem and all of the big companies that work with growers, because their grower customers are coming to them asking for advice, and these big companies don't know what the answer is. And so, what we really think about carbon markets is that they need to be able to meet the needs of, most growers, the 80% of growers. And today what we see is it's really the top, 1 to 5%, the top tier of growers who have access to a lot of capital, who are incredibly tech savvy and progressive. These are the ones who are able to go out and adopt these expensive practices and have access to carbon markets. But we want it to be accessible to all growers around the world as a great mechanism for helping bring in a revenue source, but also promote the adoption of these practices. We also want recognition for growers who have already adopted great practices. And in the carbon markets and the offset markets, there's actually only room for growers who adopt a practice for a first time. So I'm converting from a conventional tillage system to no-till. And the growers who have done no-till for, the past 20 years actually aren't eligible for these markets. And so we really need more than just a carbon offset to help fuel, the transition to regenerative ag. We need different types of incentives. So we can think of things like premium pricing for regeneratively grown grain, similar to what we have for organic grain. Or when we talk about companies who are making what's called a science-based targets pledge. So for example, Starbucks is one of them who says, I'm going to reduce my carbon footprint by 50% by 2030. Well, that's a very tall order. And they go through a group called Science-Based Targets to set their, emission reduction target. And under this pledge that they sign, they agree to not buy carbon offsets. So instead, they have to directly reduce emissions within their supply chain, not buy an offset. And so this is another type of incentive that growers can have access to. How do we enable companies like Starbucks or Danone or General Mills to reduce their own carbon emissions within their supply chains, as opposed to going out and buying carbon offsets from somewhere else? It needs to be flexible. And so, we need to be able to account for the way that agriculture actually functions, which is annually. And there needs to be some equity. The carbon prices need to go up if we're going to expect growers to bear the burden of financing the transition to regenerative ag. They need to get a better return, or a more obvious return on their investment. And so that's kind of where CIBO comes in. We are a software platform. So my role at CIBO is VP of Product Management. So I head up our software platform solution. I work with a phenomenal team of developers and engineers and scientists and product managers. And it's been incredibly fun, to get to be set loose in the tech world and work with great people and build great solutions in a startup environment. We've had to respond very quickly to evolutions in the ag carbon market and applying our technology there. So we leverage technology we license from Michigan State. We leverage computer vision, satellite imagery, to come up with information about land. And so we have 3 big products. One is called CIBO Insights. And if you go to our website, you can get there. It's free to use. And this just gives a lot of data about land. We do yield forecasting throughout the whole season. We have zone maps for each farm field in the US. We come up with land valuation, kind of like Zillow for agriculture. We can tell you historical cropping rotations using satellite imagery. We can actually tell you if a grower is already doing regenerative practices, what their tillage practices are. And then we have another product called CIBO Carbon. And probably, I think in October, we launched a pilot program in 2020 to develop carbon credits from growers. And so we have these carbon credits available for sale on our marketplace, and you can buy carbon offsets directly from farmers. We're currently working to put carbon offsets on a major carbon credit registry as well. So end buyers of carbon offsets like to go through a few very well-established, what are called registries. So CIBO's doing a project with one of those big registries as well. And then the big product that we released just at the beginning of June is called CIBO Enterprise. And so our mission is to bring access to the technology needed to scale regenerative agriculture and the software technology specifically. And so CIBO Enterprises leverages kind of all the technology stack that we've built in a white labeled platform that organizations that work with growers can use. So for example, we're doing a pilot with an ag input company, and they're using the platform to be able to incentivize growers to adopt regenerative practices, to monitor what practices and verify the practices the growers are doing, and then to give them an incentive payment, and as well as quantify the impact those incentives have. So if I'm going to go out and pay a grower $10 an acre to plant a cover crop, I want to be able to quantify the emissions reduction incurred because that cover crop was planted. And that's what our platform is really good for. And really just fundamentally, the technology platform is made of 3 big components. One is the scientific crop modeling and ecosystem simulation, and this is what we license from Michigan State University. And this predicts the day-to-day growth of a plant as well as the day-to-day dynamics of carbon in the soil. And we use this actually for yield forecasting as well. So if you go to our website and to our Insights product, you can actually click on any farm field in the Midwest in the US and get a yield forecast for it in real time and change some of the parameters and run the model yourself. Then we also use this component to quantify greenhouse gas emissions. So we can quantify greenhouse gas emissions, the carbon footprint of an individual farm field, very quickly and efficiently. So, we can click on a field, we can do this without growers putting in data and get an immediate assessment of the carbon footprint. We can modify the practices and then get a new assessment of the carbon footprint to figure out what our emissions reductions would be if we change our practices. And this also can tell us what our carbon credits and carbon offsets could be. And it's really valuable to be able to show this information to a grower or to an enterprise that works with growers before they make the commitment to adopt the practice or join a carbon market. We want growers to know right away what the potential is before they make the economic decisions. The other piece of the platform is computer vision and AI-based remote sensing. So we use satellite imagery, freely available satellite imagery, 10-meter sentinel data, coupled with deep neural networks and transfer learning to be able to identify practices occurring on the ground. So we use the scientific modeling to quantify, then we use the computer vision to verify. So we can see that they did the cover crop, we can see what type of tillage practice the grower has. We can see the primary cash crop, are they irrigating, what are the field boundaries? And we do this throughout the growing season so that we can verify practices in a very scalable, economically efficient way. We don't need to go out to the field to know that a grower planted a cover crop. We can see it with a satellite. And then the final piece is the software development and scale cloud infrastructure. So I feel like, across the board, agriculture has been underserviced by great software technology. A lot of ag software can be somewhat clunky. And so we want to create systems that are very modern. Just because someone is a grower doesn't mean they don't have a cell phone and they're not used to using Google. So we create a really nice user experience, cloud infrastructure, so everything processes very efficiently and quickly on the back end. And we can run very complicated models, in near real time. And so kind of all of this technology is being applied today towards solving, kind of one of the biggest challenges of our day is how do we address climate change and its impact in our agricultural systems? And then how do we preserve our long-term food security around the world? And I can add that today, we are really focused in the US, but we are expanding internationally. And part of, the way we want to do that is partnering with large organizations who have footprints in other companies. So we have access to growers there and have a better understanding of international agricultural systems. Thank you.
Great, Janet. It was just unfortunately, the time is a constraint. Otherwise, we can keep on listening to the nice story. And I strongly believe that regenerative agriculture is most important thing which can happen to agriculture. The way we are doing farming for past few decades, unfortunately, is creating far more challenges than the solutions. So thanks a lot for a great presentation. And definitely, I would touch base with you because something what you are doing as Honeybee, we are operational in Africa, in Asia. I know the farmers are smallholding farmers. It is more challenging to serve them. But I would love to take your technology to this part of the world and look forward to engage with your organization and see to it jointly we create a better world. So thanks a lot for the participation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
So it was great presenting. So now we already have our next speaker, Suzanne Groeneveld. Suzanne is an entrepreneur, co-founder of WS Marketing with Soar, Get Healthy, and Sylvester.ai. She is a problem solver with over 20 years of experience shaping growth marketing approach for mid and large size companies. Floor is yours, Suzanne. Suzanne, we cannot hear you somehow. Yeah, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
I was on my phone, I'm sorry. Okay.
It's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. Here we are. Okay. I'll restart here. So thanks, Deepak, for this opportunity. And just before I get into my presentation, I wanted to thank all the speakers that have gone ahead of me. I don't even know you're sleeping. You must be sleep deprived now, Deepak. You've been doing this for a few hours. I don't know how you do it. Maybe there's more than one of you, but just incredible speakers. I've really appreciated this time, and I know that everybody's giving freely. I'm going to take a bit of a different approach. I'm going to be talking about marketing and ag, but really I want to talk about women in agriculture. And I can do this from a lens of marketing, but I'm going to take a bit of a different path here. And, my presentation was really, I hope, inspires companies to consider more women in these roles. We have a severe lack of women in leadership. And so I'm going to touch on that as I go through my story. So to start, as Deepak mentioned, I am a co-founder at WS, which is a marketing practice. We work with agricultural clients across North America. You could call me a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I've launched quite a few companies, and Deepak mentioned our latest is actually an AI company in animal health. But also co-founder in True Media, Evoke Research, and a globally recognized not-for-profit, a bit of a passion play for better care in cats. So this growth mindset and entrepreneurial spirit has been the fuel that's helped us embrace a digital-first customer-centric approach. And we've been able to attract talent right across North America. Because of this approach. We're really strong in culture, and we believe that that is our greatest strength, is when we're all working to the same purpose. And I do think that that ties in closely with women leadership. So if I may, I'm going to just share my screen. You don't need to see that. And I'm going to present here. I'm not as fluid as Jenette. So you should see an old-timey picture on your screen. Let me know if you don't. But basically, we're going to start here. We're going to start at the beginning. So I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And we work right across North America. But, I started, and I think our origin stories are so important when we talk about women in agriculture, because we've had to work to get here. But my story is, this is how my great-grandfather would have farmed at the turn of the century in the 1900s in Western Canada. This is not my family, and I'm not quite sure what they're doing with, I don't know if they're going on a date or what is happening here, but as you can see, it was a very, very intensive type of agriculture in the 1800s. Back then, my family sold Clydesdales horses. So you couldn't survive in Western Canada. We have massive land here without good horses to power your farming. In fact, a lot of the crops were actually created to feed the horses that helped harvest the crops. So, we talk about sustainability. You couldn't survive, right? And so it was a good living for the family to make money helping other farmers in their livelihood. A real turning happening when tractors were introduced around World War I. And I would say that this was the biggest revolutionary change in agriculture around the globe, was when tractors and technology was introduced. And so guess what? When you're selling Clydesdales as the power, all of a sudden the market dropped out. And so they had to really have a pivot discussion in terms of what they were going to do. And of course, they didn't use those words. But they decided, instead of fighting technology and resisting the tractor, they decided to embrace them and take to market something different. During the pandemic, right, we've seen this massive shift to yes, where in the past we were really more resistant to change. This is an old adage, age of humans, right? So being open to change is really, really important. And that's really what I want to get across here is we need to keep changing, and what better place than ag. When my family started to do this, they had to they decided to raise purebred cattle, and they had to really shift what mattered to them. They had to understand their customers. They had to understand a new supply system. They had to rebuild an infrastructure and retrain their labor. And so what that taught me is to always stay ahead of the change. And it's probably why I was so attracted to marketing, because I didn't want to get fooled. And guess what? I get fooled every day. Nobody's immune to what's happening there. So, this was just an important lesson that I've carried through, and I think it really fuels my entrepreneurial spirit. I ask a lot of why questions to challenge thinking. And what better way to do this than through agriculture? When I was picking I have an undergrad, actually, a science degree in agriculture. And then as I got into the workforce, I really started to gravitate to marketing because I could see how influential marketing is. A lot of things that we do in agriculture, we tend to think of marketing as a function of accounting. It's just something that you need to have and let the product sell itself. But as we see more entry, and Jenette did a great job talking about carbon, that emotional context is just as relevant to farmers as it is to anybody else. So marketing for me really helped put my passion of agriculture and marketing together. And so we have clients today that, range from UPL, which Deepak should, head office is Mumbai, Anuvia Fertilizer, we'll talk about them a little bit in terms of late growth stage ag tech, federated co-ops in retail, Verge Ag, which is software as a service, Vive, which is a nanotechnology, Alberta beef producers, Mealshare, outstanding young farmers, distilleries and breweries. We really go from primary ag all the way to table. And all of those stops have helped influence our systems. And I'm not going to jump into like our, how we do marketing. I'm happy to have that chat. And I actually, you'll see me on chat if you want to talk further. We do have a very digital first system, but that's just in keeping with, the technology that's available today. So that's a little bit about me. I want to jump into the category of agriculture. Wow, how exciting. This is such an incredible time to be in agriculture. And I think you've heard that over the past speakers as well. It's just so exciting. I was just on a call this morning with a multinational talking about rebranding because those silos are being broke down at a record pace, and women, there's no better part of the population to help break this down. We're used to it, you guys. We've been trying to break that ceiling for a while now. And so what better place for us than to do this in agriculture? The purposefulness of agriculture is so profound. It touches every facet of everything that people and that planet need. So I know you guys are all believers because you're here, but it's really, really profound. And we have to stay ahead of it. This is the largest industry on the globe, but yet we have this huge gender gap. And I didn't get to see everybody's presentation, so I know that this thread has been picked up a little bit. To be honest, I'm much more comfortable talking about what my company does than talking about women in ag, but I feel like this is the proper platform to have a point of view on this. In Canada, similar to the US, 72% of ag businesses don't have a woman on the board. And I think what's really, really important to think about is women represent 51% of the population. So McKinsey actually put together an economical study on GDP effects if we do not move to gender parity. So it is absolutely crucial that we see more women. And as you know, like the women that have been speaking, obviously we're very mindful of this, but we can't do this alone. And we can't drive this agenda forward without the help of men that want to help support this. But, we have to move here if we're going to feed a growing population. We don't really have a choice. We need more women involved in a lot more of the decision making. So what's holding us back? Why do we have this problem? And why in agriculture? And I mean, as a woman in agriculture, you guys can all, for those of you that are on the same side of the table that I am, or, diversity or minority, does it kind of feel pointless sometimes? I just thought was a really nice visualization of the zero-sum thinking that we really, really see epidemically in agriculture. So that zero-sum approach, right, is thinking about winner take all. In order for women to get ahead, men might get behind, right? That's a zero-sum thinking approach. It's the perception that one person's gain would be another person's loss. Poker is a zero-sum game. In order for someone to win, there needs to be someone else losing. Think of every sports analogy that you can think of, right? And so we call this the tyranny of zero-sum thinking in agriculture, or I call it, because working towards better outcomes creates a bigger pie. So this idea of co-opetition, we see it in distilleries a lot, we see it in food service, is relatively new in agriculture. In agriculture, we very much had a siloed approach, patriarchal, conservative, with power held by a few very powerful companies. And you can name as well as I a lot of them that have held that space and have been very territorial in holding that space, right? So, they buy the competition and it's winner take all. And that has been the norm in agriculture for a long time. And we're seeing some shift now because of what's happening and the imperative, especially around technology and also these issues that we have with climate and such that we just heard about from Jenette. And there's nothing to apologize for this, but there's just no better time for women now to come and be a part of this. And even though the bulk of our audience of farmers is still male, those dynamics are also quickly shifting. So we know about 1/3 of the population in farming, in primary farming, is female. More importantly, this shift to this younger audience is also driving a change. And that younger generation is going to be more tech savvy, but they're also going to be looking at some of the softer bits where before, when you think about that, the slide that I showed, with the horse cultivating a small tract of land, that was all about just keeping the lights on the farm. Now we're trying to think about how do we keep the lights on, but also grow a healthy planet, or stop some of the issues that we have in climate change. So these things really align well with how women work, because we tend to, I'm generalizing, and I think all of us have had experiences early in our career where we've had to make a decision. Do you become part of the system, or do you path out on your own way? And early in my career, actually, I had someone pull me aside and said, you're going to do great, but you got to get a way thicker skin. And you have to do what your boss tells you need to do and go with the flow. And I thought, do I give up my, my personal identity, which I don't fundamentally believe it's my way or the highway or that patriarchal approach? I actually think we get better work out of collaboration. Do I give that up to actually grow my career? And it actually is what helped spin me out into my own business, because I just couldn't get traction with that. And I saw a lot of women actually capitulate to be successful in that older system. So the times they're changing, and I mean, this is a testament, even having this platform is a testament to that. So we're really well aligned psychologically to think about the opposite of zero sum. So win-win and collaboration. This co-opetition that I mentioned, this is an incredible shift in attitude. It's almost like sitting on the opposite side of the table. And when we are based in fear and control, we'll tend to go back to zero sum. But when we're thinking in terms of openness and try and diversity and inclusion, we can go faster. It feels better, but actually you get a lot more innovation on this side of the table. And that's what we're seeing a lot in ag tech. Even, when we think about design thinking and agile marketing, really honing in on those levers is creating better outcomes. So, we really hold it dear at WS. It's like rocket fuel for successful companies today. And we've heard it, like I think Pam with Marrone Bio, talked about don't hire jerks. This collaborative approach is, everybody has an opinion, right? And yeah, is it as efficient as just one person making a decision? Maybe not always, but long-term, it's going to be much better journey into success. So we need this in design thinking. It requires collaboration. Something to think about here is that Harvard Business Review, and I mean, again, I know I'm speaking to conversion here, but I think it's really important, you guys, we take credit for this and we carrying this forward. We shouldn't be talking about why women, we should be talking about why not women on a board or in leadership positions. So we know Harvard Business Review just did yet another survey in 2019. And out of 19 leadership attributes, women rated higher. So take initiative, resilience, practices self-development, drives for results, displays high integrity and honesty, develops others, builds relationships, champions change, establishes stretch goals, collaboration and teamwork. We all ranked higher. Now, not significantly higher, but enough to say, listen, what's holding us back is we are having this balance, do we have family or not? But in terms of what we have to offer, take any bit of women input that you can, because it's only going to make your company stronger. So the other thing I want to just kind of double down on here from my point of view is, talent has no gender. So, over the course of my career, I haven't tried to lead with, obviously I am female, but I do not lead with that. But I do think that I've actually used it as a lever sometimes in ways that held me back in terms of it was good enough. I was happy to go to part-time because I was having kids on maternity. And now we're all talking about work from home and that transition after COVID back to the office. And, that's a construct. Full-time in the office is a construct of 1950s workplace. Why are we even talking about that? Right? So this is about that presenteeism. There's so many things that we have to unshackle that having a different perspective is something that women can offer. So I'm just going to get into a couple of videos, and I apologize if it's a little bit staggered. I know we've probably got viewership from different parts of the globe. I hope it works okay. But, a real tip that I have for anybody is finding your people. And there's more people that are like-minded than ever, which is really, really exciting. Embrace diversity and collaboration, all kinds of diversity and collaboration. It was interesting in our own company, the majority of our audience is still farmers, right? And they're older white male farmers in North America. And we had quite a candid conversation about what it means for us to drive diversity and inclusion. And, our mandate was, we're going to do it. We're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. If we in turn end up with clients that aren't comfortable, then they're not a good fit for us, because this is our path forward and this is what we want to live by. And I think we do have to take those stands if we're going to really drive this forward. So I'm going to start a little video here that I hope you guys can all watch here and see. I just hope it runs smooth for you. This is a client. I didn't talk a lot about our work, but I think this is a good demonstration of, we call them case stories, of a client that we really believe in, that is targeted at growers between 18 and 39 years of age. And it really speaks to their passion, but also to WS's passion for doing things a little bit differently.
Their numbers are growing, representing billions of dollars and counting to our economy, and driving real change in our food systems. Yet, marketers still aren't speaking to them in a way that works. Who are they? They're Canada's outstanding young farmers. Innovative, smart, highly skilled, data-driven, revolutionary. So, why is the industry talking to these guys? Too many are still assuming all farmers are the same. Want your audience to actually listen? Find out what drives them, why they make decisions, why they're outstanding. Canada's Outstanding Young Farmers Program partnered with us to take the conversation right to these young rebels with an edgy, Banksy-inspired campaign, a call to farms, real people with different values, motivations, and interests. Unique qualities revealed through behavioral data. We aren't just talking to farmers. These people are outstanding.
When we partnered with WS, they looked at this from a different angle. They understood who we were trying to speak to and executed in a way that resonates with our audience.
Together, we served up a new landing page designed to help drive nominations along with impactful digital ads served up to young farmers online, and a virtual event highlighting a future shaped by the very people we are talking to. Let's grow the future of agriculture. Let's grow something together.
So, really proud of there. You know, if you ever want inspiration, talk to a farmer. You know, it's phenomenal the market that we get to be in. I also want to share with you. This is my final, final couple slides here. But I also want to share
their numbers.
Sorry about that. This is Anuvia Plant Nutrients is one of our clients. Jenette talked about carbon sequestration. This is one of those sustainable fertilizers. So it's, if you haven't heard of Anuvia, they're based in Florida. They take waste, food waste, and they pellet it into high nitrogen fertilizer. You can do more with less, very, very high yield impact, and circular economy. So incredibly green. And we've helped them with their branding from day one, and you know that is a sweet spot for us is commercialization to late growth stage startups. Anuvia just closed their $100 million seed series round, and they're going to be doing some amazing things. And we've helped them commercialize right across the U.S. and now into Canada. And stay tuned because it's going to get more exciting for Anuvia. But this is just a bit of a case study on some of their work.
As part of their commitment to a circular economy, Anuvia Plant Nutrients makes products from reclaimed organic matter. The process provides immediate and long-term soil benefits and gives Simtrix fertilizer a unique, dark appearance. Anuvia was expanding into new markets, looking to increase demand for Simtrix in the lucrative Southern States Cooperative. Research uncovered some key insights. Most growers thought most fertilizers were essentially the same, and they generally believed sustainability was the enemy of profitability. With that in mind, our goal was to be as different as possible and push the message that they can have it all with Simtrix. In partnership with an award-winning animation team, we brought the Simtrix granules to life as the stars of a dark, futuristic landscape, contrasting the sunny images of typical fertilizer ads. The animation used icons to deliver a message of balance, profitability, and sustainability with a confident, understated style. The high-res video images were used across an integrated media strategy for a consistent look. All campaign elements pointed to a custom landing page connected to a live dashboard, allowing us to monitor audience response and adjust tactics in real time. The campaign received over 15.7 million impressions and exceeded the lead generation goal by almost 24%. With an 86% increase in traffic to Anuvia's Where to Buy page, the campaign uncovered priceless data on how and when growers consume media and what messages effectively turn interest into action. With a unique message and visual style, the future of fertilizer puts Simtrix in its own dimension, harvesting smarter data for a bigger audience today and tomorrow.
So this was Anuvia was interesting, right? Because understanding the market, we know that the investors cared about the carbon and carbon sequestration, but growers are really worried about keeping their doors open and having a little bit of margin success. And so we actually led with ROI. And you saw that in the imagery, and now we're just shifting. We're shifting the campaign now as trends change. But really interesting take on what our markets are doing and how fast this is shifting. So that's kind of where we hang out. But it's all about change. And Deepak, that's the end of my slides. I really appreciate the time, and I don't know if we have time for questions or if you want to leave it at that, I'm good with that too.
Suzanne, after such a beautiful presentation, I cannot let you go without asking a question. So let me honor of asking you a question. You've talked about motivating women in agriculture, and marketing is such a powerful tool, right, to achieve whatever you want to, right? It's marketing which has made us eat cereals for so long, right? So I would request you if you can guide those young entrepreneurs who want to make their career in agriculture but through marketing. What would be your advice for them?
Oh, get a mentor. Okay, actually two things. Get a mentor and work for somebody else. So marketing is moving so fast, and you might have great ideas, but take your time to do your due diligence, have some bad experiences. What worked for me really well was actually working in a patriarchal system, and then understanding, if that hit my value system or not. And then that alignment coming out really helped me attract clients that are like-minded. So this is why we play so well in ag tech, right? But when you're just starting or in your younger phase, you really don't know, right? And you've got all this messaging like follow your passion, and you know what? Have really crappy jobs too, right? Like I worked in the field, and you got to have the whole experience, right? Because this is not, okay, marketing, none of this is easy. Not one person's story is easy here. There's no instant wins. So you have to think about what gets you up in the morning and what inspires you. But I'd really recommend for women having a mentor. We want to help, and it's absolutely imperative. And it doesn't have to be a female, but it can be a male as well. But if I didn't have people that didn't open doors for me, I wouldn't be here. And I think that's probably true of every person on the planet. So you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone.
So if you are in Canada or US, please apply to Suzanne, work for her for a few years. I'm pretty sure you'll become an awesome marketeer. Thanks a lot. So thanks a lot. It was a pleasure to hear insightful presentation from you. Thanks a lot. So now we would like to go to our next guest. We are having an awesome young woman. She believed in herself, and now she has achieved what many of us believe we should be achieving. So Mariana Vasconcelos, she is a founder of Agrosmart, which brings digital agriculture to developing countries with low internet infrastructure under tropical agronomic condition, allowing farmers to make better decisions for a more productive and sustainable agriculture. She is Forbes Under 30, a technology pioneer, World Economic Forum, and many more awards. Mariana, floor is yours, and we are waiting to hear insightful presentation from you.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Deepak, for the invitation. It was amazing. I got to hear the Susan speech for a while. So very inspiring, and I'm so happy to be able to interact with other women. Well, everyone, I am Mariana. I am daughter of farmers, and I come from Brazil. Like my family produce corn, coffee, and breed horses as well here. And I grew up very closely to the daily challenge of decision-making in the fields, right? And agriculture all over the world is going under a pressure for change, where we need to increase food production in up to 70% in order to feed the world in 2050. At the same time, we have to handle issues such as water crisis. Brazil again is undergoing a very severe drought period where farmers have to adapt. We have like less and less available land, especially when we talk about deforestation. It is such a sensible topic here, on like how we can increase our production without expanding new land, and also getting people to stay in farming, as the majority of the young people are leaving the fields to work in the city and in something else. So land is also an issue. And last but not least, climate change, right? Like the climate has been changing and affecting the way farmers produce. Not only it makes their need to learn faster, like it changes everything they knew and how they would consult for academics and experience in order to know what to do. But it also changes the regimes on the water availability, increases the pressure on diseases, pests, and the occurrence of extreme weather events. And when we talk about tropical countries, that is way more intense than other regions because of our climatic conditions. So the farmer is being pushed to adapt, right? Like they need to produce more. At the same time, they use less land, less water, and they adapt to climate change. In addition to that, there's also a change in the consumer behavior, right? Like more and more, the consumers want to know where food comes from, how was they produced, if it was sustainably produced, and the pandemic just sped it up. Now everyone wants to understand how resilient is our food system, right? Like how we can ensure we'll continue to produce food. So traceability became an issue. So farmers not only have to handle with the challenge they have to continue producing, but also to report what they are doing so they can comply with the demands of the consumers and the food companies. In Latin America, and is a region that is in charge of producing many of our goods. Brazil is the largest food producer and exporter for several crops, such as coffee, sugarcane, orange juice, right now like chicken and cow meat as well, and the second one in terms of soybean complex. So, and we are the ones who detain Amazonia and several other environmental assets, right? And being pushed by the world on how to produce more sustainably. And what I see, and talking about women in ag and so on, is how important is women participation when we talk about balancing the ESG, right? The environmental, social, and compliance framework, as women are usually more worried and more careful about handling those issues. They are having an exceptional role in helping farmers to digitally transform and to be more compliant. So at least in Brazil, I'm very optimistic because we see a big change in the behavior of the farm, especially after the pandemic. Like everyone gained conscience that the digital transformation was happening to making farmer more efficient. But now they also understand that the technology is here to support them to be more sustainable, and that both things can be done at the same time. They're not exclusive. We can produce more. At the same time, we are more efficient in the use of natural resources, more transparent, and more climate resilience. So there's a big market opportunity for not only producing food to the world coming from Latin America, but also to provide environmental services, as preserving nature is now also recognized. And the carbon market's appearance is something that is very relevant, because the trade of risk and return for the farmers have always been more risk for the farmer and more return to the supply chain. And now when we look the initiatives with carbon credits and regulations of the markets, we create a huge opportunity of compensating farmers who do a good job to validate their investments in the technology and the sustainability, because they are able to monetize that with carbon credits, or like selling their products with a premium to the consumers. And with that all in mind, like seeing the transformations our industry is going through, in 2014, I decided to become an entrepreneur in farming. I really saw how my parents and my family were struggling in order to make decisions and to adapt to climate change. And I have been working with tech for other industries, and we realized, why not use tech in agriculture, that not only I come from there, so I understand the day-to-day, but also for Brazil has such an importance on our economy and for our whole region in Latin America. And the first thing we understood, like that we needed to support the farmers with, was having data. In Latin America, as many emerging countries, the quantity of data is very low, like provided by the governments or the infrastructure and so on. So we needed to have data. And there was a big challenge that was connectivity. Until today, like almost 70% of the farmers do not have internet in the field. So how we can collect data and help them to become digital if we don't have any, right? So that was the first step we wanted to address. So we developed an IoT solution with sensors, like we deploy sensors, weather sensors, soil sensors, and so on. But we have a connectivity solution to allow to collect data anywhere. And once we started doing that, we realized there was another issue, that was education. Farmers and agronomists were not ready to just interpret the data. We needed to support them in that journey, to help them to understand what was going on and how they could make better decisions. So we started working on algorithms, on supporting the decision making. So we developed first an irrigation algorithm to tell them how much water what to use, as Brazil was going through that time, and again now in a big water crisis. So our model allowed farmers to reduce an average 60% of water, 40% of energy, and increase yield in up to 20%. And we also deliver to them their carbon avoided emissions with that. Besides it, we have like our own weather forecast, as the lack of infrastructure is an issue. The weather forecasts are not very good. So with a good amount of data, we were able to provide a more precise weather forecast. And we started moving towards predicting models. So like, for example, we can tell 50 days in advance if the coffee farmer will have coffee rust, and that's the main disease for coffee in the region, so that he can decrease the incidence of the disease and the input usage. But even though we are providing tools for the farmers, we saw that the digital transformation process was very complex. And we needed to engage everyone in the supply chain if we wanted for them to actually have access and change. So we started working with the corporations. We work with input companies, helping them on their R&D before they launch a product, so they can have data to orient research and then test the usage of their products, creating more efficient protocols and supporting like the digitalization strategy. We work with food and beverage companies that source from smallholder farmers and family farmers, where we share like the data network that we have and allow for each farmer to individually be supported in their decisions. But we also support the corporation to allocate labor as they provide technical assistance for those farmers, and to mitigate risk, like helping them to adapt to climate change and like have traceability of that supply chain. And last but not least, we support the financial sector to understand better the risk and price better their products. So today, like, we consolidated ourselves as a platform that is working all over the food supply chain with the same data support decision making. In the beginning of this year, we acquired our first company called Agro. With that, we are the largest ag data network in Latin America. We have over 200,000 farmers using our products and really like supporting them in that journey to produce more and connect with the stakeholders while being sustainable. As a woman in this journey, it has been very challenging in the beginning, especially because I didn't study agronomy. I'm a business person, I'm a woman, and I'm young. So by default, everyone would just assume they didn't know what I was doing. And why would I be an innovator in that field if I didn't have the background to do so? So it was very hard to convince people that we were creating something nice and they should try it. I always had lots of openings from the farmers. They would receive me and they would treat me like a daughter, but they wouldn't buy from me because they wouldn't want to talk money with me, right? So like we have to create a more diverse team in order to be able to penetrate the market. And later on, the corporate relations is very challenging as well, as many men still try to diminish our work or our achievements just because we are women. So like gender equality have been a big cause for me, alongside with other SDGs that imply on agriculture being more sustainable, because I really believe in the power that women have on making change, right? In the future, bringing together how to make a better world, how to take care of people as well as business. So like I not only resisted, continue to do that, even though it was challenging in the fields with customers and even with investors to fundraise for my business to grow. But little by little, I formed a network of women, and I'm part of networks today, not Latin America, but especially Brazil and Argentina, on how women in ag can support each other. And the movement is great. Like when I started 7 years ago, there was almost no women. And now, more and more, besides the communities, there is like a Congress of Women in Ag just like this, where we can talk and we can get together. And we see more women taking over the farm operations. Before, there was just the wife of someone, the wife of a farmer, the wife of the executive. And now, little by little, we see women actually running and making decisions in the field. And when they do that, they hire other women and they incentivize that industry to grow. Susan also brought a topic that is very important on that point, on the decision making, right? Brazil this last year just had its first ag CEO in Bayer. So the Bayer Crop Science CEO is currently a woman. We also had the first women president in the last 100 years, like it was just men, of the Rural Association community. So it was the first time that Brazil has a woman president and a president for Mercosur as well. So like all the South America region is now led by a woman on the associations of farmers. So those are important moves that little by little go putting women in power and then creating that network of support. We still see very few Latin American entrepreneurs in ag tech. In California, I see that movement growing. Amy Wu just launched a book on women in agriculture, like from the region of California mostly, but also includes other profiles. And I really believe it's important to tell those stories. Brazil also launched a book on Mulheres do Agro, like women in agriculture. So we can get to know the other women and what they are doing, and in the hope that it will inspire other women to get engaged and get to power. And when we look to board, that's still a challenge. In my company, we do have 2 women in the board, and we continue to fight for having women in every area of software, hardware, agronomy, sales, business, and like it doesn't really matter, but we need to have diversity. But we are a minority, maybe because I'm a woman founder, we make it happen. But when we look to our colleagues in other companies, we continue to be the only women in the room. So I think forums like this one are very important, so we can bring the topic to attention and get more women inspired and connected so they can make a change. I think the digital transformation in agriculture, there's no way back, right? Like we have seen that happening for the past few years, and now it gains speed. It's actually happening because we are finding the business models, we are finding the connections with other markets, such as the fintech world, on how to make credit and intelligence together, in the carbon world. So like we are seeing that move, and it's really important that we don't leave no one behind, no farmer behind. And that's why I believe we need to engage more and more women in those roles, from the farming leadership to the ag tech leadership and founding teams, up to investors and women boards, because when there is a woman in power, we can empower other women to continue growing. I see the perspective of Latin America is a little bit behind other regions like California and Europe, where the feminist movement is stronger and older. So it has been happening in other sectors and coming to agriculture, but it is growing very fast. And as an emerging region, everything grows in an accelerated speed. So I see a lot of potential on increasing the equality of gender in agriculture for the region, as well as the digitalization journey, right? Like we need to provide almost half of the food of the world for the next years. And there is this commitment of all the stakeholders in the supply chain, government, private sector, NGOs, startups, and so on, to make it happen. So the region can not only export food, but also export technology and safe food and sustainable food. Well, I think I will stop by here, Deepak, like to get engaged with everyone and have like the last 15 minutes to answer some questions, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. Mariana, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And in fact, I just wanted to bring up a very, I'll say that, nostalgic memory of you, right? You talked about, I resisted, you were resilient. I can remember, I think it was in Africa, South Africa, where actually you had a fracture in your leg and still you were moving from one meeting to another, right? Not tying down. So that's what Mariana is all about, and what I believe is women empowerment is all about. With all the pain, all the challenges, she was going from one meeting to another. So Mariana, my question to you would be like, you've already talked about that in Latin America, women are already getting to the senior positions, whether it is a buyer or whether it is other organization or the farmer association. What else can be done, right, to accelerate this thing from other part of the world, which happens to be the male?
Well, I believe we need to connect, and that's why events like these ones is so important. So we can exchange benchmarks and setting goals together. And I think what can be done is like to speed up that. It's still a minority. It's still like one company, and that gets into the news because that's not common. So when a company like Bayer nominates a woman CEO, that's news everywhere. So I wonder like when we will get to a point where this is no longer news because it's just normal. So what everyone can do is to ensure that they have in their own teams, in their own business, women in leadership. Like they have to aim for that because diversity brings more systemic views, they bring more creativity, and that's what we want as an innovator, right?
Perfect. And second thing is like, coming back to the same, the topic in hand, women empowerment, right? How do you see, like, we have been talking a lot about women empowerment. And if you can see that even this event which we planned, we said we are not going to talk about women empowerment in a panel discussion. We would present the case like Mariana, who have been successful being there, registered, fought off, and became a global celebrity when it comes to agriculture technology. Do you see that this approach works well, where you create like, examples and connect these examples and make people watch, or like, you believe like it is more at a holistic level, we have to have more policy-based activities? So what's your views on this?
Yeah, I think it's really important to tell stories because stories make us believe we can do it too. And when I started my journey, I first had like a women investor in my accelerator. And she was a former executive at Motorola. There was another one that was a former executive in Johnson & Johnson. And it was like, wow, like these are the first two women that I meet that have like very high positions, and I'm curious about how did they do it, how they build their career, how do they handle their husbands, because it's such a challenge to balance family and work. And I'm like, I want to learn it. So I was so lucky to right in the beginning of my journey to find that accelerator that had two women in power. And that gave me the first, like, okay, they believe in me and I can do it too, right? And later on, I got other mentors. Like I have a mentor that is Brazilian and he used to live in Germany, and she would help me with business strategies. I have another mentor that is Claudia that used to work at the UN, and today she has her own foundation, All Human Foundation, that she also fights for Latins in the US and equality and so on. But it was like always seeing other women and helping me to dream, to see like if they did, I can do it too. And that's what I try to be as well for younger women, or women that maybe are not younger than me, but they didn't discover their power yet, and that they can have a voice and that they can do. So like having other women telling you it's okay to have a voice, it's okay to say what you want, it's okay to be bossy because we are labeled right, bossy and everything else because we are not okay to have an opinion. That's important. And so like I believe the use cases and the stories are powerful in that way. And that should be policy, because like the policy is changing because we have women in politics. So like United States electing a vice president as a woman is important. So other women know they can do that too.
That's a very awesome analogy which you have put in across, that if you have more women politicians, you'll have better policies for women for sure. Now let's deviate a little bit on the digital agriculture part of it, which is your core business. How do you see like adoption of these technologies, specifically because now from Brazil you are moving to Argentina, and maybe in your radar would be like other Latin American countries as well, where the challenges are more, as you rightly mentioned, that the penetration of internet on the farm level is pretty low. Even in US, it is 23 or 24%, right? And when you go to Latin America, like, you're lucky you're talking about it still in that double digit in Brazil. In some other countries, it would not be in a double digit. How do you still solve those challenges? And are you working on some new advanced technologies which can make within or the connectivity with the farm cheaper or something on that sort?
Yes, I think we do have like three main challenges for scaling digital ag. And the first one is infrastructure. We need to solve connectivity challenge. And for me, it's more a matter on innovating the business model. There is technology. There's satellite, there's narrowband IoT, there's Sigfox, there's so many technology out there. But the things like we are not able to find a business model that it pays the bills. The government doesn't do it, the private sector doesn't do it because no one can afford it alone. It's like being able to split those costs, right? And finding a model that works, that's very relevant. In Brazil, for example, team that is Telecom Italia managed to find a model where they would sell the towers with 4G and 5G, and including narrowband IoT, where the cooperatives or the agricultural groups that would make the investments would be able to rescue part of that investment in services. Because what brings the return on investment is not the network, is what they will do with that data that will allow them to produce more and have return on investment. So if you just try to sell the network, that's not going to be anywhere. So they are bundling their network investment with cash backs that can be rescued in services so the farmer can pay for it. So this is one example. And Brazil, for example, created a committee in the agriculture ministry for connectivity, like bringing everyone to a dialogue and creating a national plan of Internet of Things to have financing, to have elements like how do we solve this, right? So I think it's way more about getting together and finding a business model than the technology itself. And the second problem is education. So like it doesn't matter if we have the tool there, if farmers don't know how to use, if many farmers don't even know how to read. It's like how do we make that accessible? So like we do invest a lot in UI and UX to understand how to dialogue with different levels within the agricultural food supply chain, and invest in training. And that cannot be a cost on our own, it's a cost of the whole industry. It's better to everyone in the food system if farmers are conscious. So that cost should also be split. And until 1.5 years ago, even if you graduated from agronomy, you wouldn't study those things. Nowadays, at least, like they graduate knowing what is a sensor, knowing what is a satellite imagery and what it does, knowing that there is carbon. So like now that there is this direction on education on a public level that starts to work, but we still need reskilling. It's the same challenge of all the 4.0 industries moves, where we need to reskill everyone, because little by little, the farmers workers, they won't anymore just be collecting things. They won't be doing things. There's robots, there's different technologies. They need to create those technologies or analyze the data that is an output of those technologies. So we need to invest in reskilling, and that's also a shared cost of everyone. And last would be financing. There's very few financing for innovation. There's financing for buying a machinery, a new tractor, but there's not like innovation for hiring a software company and like or accessing to sensors. So we need to democratize credit, right? And I see initiatives from the Inter-American Development Bank, from Brazilian Development Bank, but it's very too bureaucratic. Farmers won't know how to access credit through a development bank. That's too little. We need commercial credit. We need every bank to be financing tech for agriculture, because actually they diminish their risk. If they invest in that, they will be able to diminish their risk and have better returns. And also fintechs, right? So I do see, and we are investing that on our own, on actually funding the farmer. So not only provide the tech, but we are also bringing them with credit so they can acquire our technology and other technologies to accelerate that transition towards a more sustainable agriculture.
Perfect. I would also like to touch upon your views on the whole concept of regenerative agriculture, and where actually we want to change the basic practices of agriculture itself, no tilling. We all have our digital technologies programmed or structured, or our algorithms based on we'll be tilling, then you'll be putting irrigation, then you'll be putting so many fertilizer, pesticide, growth models. All these set models are based on yield as the primary focus, right? And suddenly we are talking about regenerative agriculture, agroforestry. Do you see these type of things either would be a distraction for digital ag-tech industry?
I believe different production systems coexist. And as technology, we are here to support the improvement of all agriculture models. Like we are here to support traditional ag to become better and to find frameworks where regenerative and other protocols can scale. So like in Brazil, there's many use case of regenerative agriculture and the integration between forest, crops, and cattle, and how that actually is good. They have more yield, they have less nutrition needs. So like the results are here, but it's each case by each case. There's a lot of effort on rural extension, on education, on studying each case. So what I think we will do is like using our technology to understand those dynamics and create protocols to scale that faster, and they will coexist. Technology is across every sector. It's not like a directed thing. It's there to provide data and support decision making. So yes, I believe in the power of regenerative ag, and I believe a lot of it will move. But what matters is to be better. It's whatever you are as a farmer today, is to do a little bit better each day, right? Is to make better choices. So if in the end we become regenerative or we generate a carbon credit, that's a result. That is an output that is great, but it shouldn't be necessarily the end. The end is like, let's get better. Like, and there's several ways of doing that, and they will coexist.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mariana, and keep motivating us. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Straight, blunt, and to the point. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure having you as a speaker for this session. Look forward to have more interaction and more support from you for making Women in Agriculture a truly global event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. So that brings us to the next session, where we are having another awesome speaker, Karen Schuett. Karen is a co-founder and CEO of Livestock Water Recycling. She believes that progress is impossible without change, and that is the powerful idea that inspires her to provide farmers with tools to produce food in a way that will protect and nourish our planet. Floor is yours, Karen, and apologies for a little bit delay and a little bit out of scheduling. I'm so sorry for that. Floor is yours, ma'am.
No problem. Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be listening to all these wonderful speakers. I'm going to share a little presentation that I have to show what we are working on in our business and talk a little bit about what I've been doing in my career. So at Livestock Water Recycling, we make water from manure. And we made this water from manure here on our screen. The most common question I get asked in my everyday life is, why manure? How on earth did you look at a manure pond and think that looks like a great source of clean water? Like many new innovations, we started with a bit of coincidence mixed with a little audacity and a lot of good luck. I will tell you a little bit more about where I started and then later on explain what we've done with manure. My goal was and continues to be to facilitate access to plentiful clean water to everyone on the planet. I come from a 20-year water treatment background, and this path has led me to my love of manure. I started in university planning to go into medicine because my goal in life was to help people. I took a degree in biology, and while still in university, I took a summer job with an environmental company treating groundwater and wastewater. And I immediately developed a passion for making clean water. When we look at statistics like only 4% of all water consumed on our planet is recycled for reuse, I really dug into that problem and could see that there was benefit that we could create by recycling more water. And I have continued to see how creating water cleaning technology can help people on a very broad scale in a very impactful way. In my previous commercialization with that environmental company, my co-founder and I were involved with everything from cleaning jet fuel from groundwater under airports like JFK and O'Hare to clear across the US, working on hexavalent chromium projects in Hinckley, California. We often say that manure is the most exciting water treatment opportunity to come along in our career. And people laugh at us, but we're serious. Manure is natural and it's organic. And coming from outside the agricultural industry, let us look at manure in a unique way with a unique perspective. When looking at a farm like this, these manure lagoons might look like they are easy, low tech, likely inexpensive. But it turns out they're not that. They are difficult, they're time consuming, they're production limiting, and they're expensive. Across the US, large livestock farms produce 335 million gallons of manure annually to be stored in these lagoons. And with that comes problems for farmers and the food industry like emissions, runoff, and large expenses. What we quickly discovered is that this manure is dilute. These manure lagoons actually only contain 5% manure solids and 95% water. What we really have been doing isn't just cleaning water. We have hacked into the problems with this dilute liquid to find out what insight and value that manure can provide us. We are modernizing manure management. Along with discovering how much water was trapped inside manure lagoons, we also found out the expense involved in these liquids to move and land spread this, and farmers have to deal with it every year. A dairy farm with 2,500 cows produces as much liquid waste as a city with over 400,000 people and can spend almost $750,000 each year managing that dilute liquid. Overall, when we looked at these lagoons and even floated boats across them, we saw a water treatment market that was vastly underserviced. And most importantly, we saw an opportunity to create value from water treatment that we had never seen before. With that value in mind, we developed a system to be installed on farm to receive liquids directly from the barns before they ever went to a lagoon. The first stage involves a biodegradable flocculant to pull 5% of those solids out of the liquid stream. These solids contain nitrogen, organic nitrogen, and all of the phosphorus in manure. The second stage extracts out the ammonium, potassium, magnesium, and other valuable micronutrients. And we are left with up to 75% clean potable water to be used anywhere on the farm. Those manure solids contain all of the essential nutrients required by plants and crop growth. It is essential for the resilience of our food system that we regenerate our soils and bring all of this nutrient back to our soil that grows our food. Our system allows us to be extracted from manure streams, and it was this that creates value from water treatment. We manufacture the system in 5 models depending on the farm size. And what distinguishes us is our system runs from sensors and machine learning algorithms. It can run from a cell phone, so it doesn't increase your farm labor requirements. And of course, it recycles that clean potable water. Our systems are all connected. They're connected within the farm to all aspects of your farming operation. And then they're all connected to our office, so we can monitor daily operations. All the data is accumulated and analyzed. Data from our system sensors is used to optimize operations and benchmark the systems. And then it is made available as actionable data dashboards to our clients. In this way, we have begun the process of digitizing the world's manure. We have created a wonderful app that provides farms with real-time information from their manure to bring it to its best possible end use. As I have evolved within my career, my goal of providing clean water for all has brought me to the realization that in order to fully clean and recycle all of the world's wastewater, we need to digitize it. Today, we work within a beautiful circular economy, working together with food producers to recycle natural fertilizers, sink carbon on farms, and recycle clean water. We work on all kinds of manure and biosolid waste, including all livestock production, like dairy, hog, and beef production, as well as poultry and egg wash processing, and then importantly, meat processing and biogas development. We have sold systems across 10 US states and internationally into the Middle East, the UK, and the European Union. Most predominantly now, we work in mixed waste, where we work together with biogas producers to create full value propositions. By hacking manure into its component parts, we've been able to unlock all of the value. Each year, one cow can produce 100 gallons of fuel. This is so impactful, considering there are 1 billion cows on the planet. Renewable natural gas allows our farms to engage with the energy markets to create additional revenue while producing fuel for the economy that is considered carbon negative. This fuel can displace traditional fuel sources and really help our environment. In addition to creating renewable gas, of course, we create value from our natural fertilizers. Our goal with our system installations was to model our fertilizer work after the success of other recycled materials like paper waste. We want to make recycling manure fun, profitable, mainstream, and worldwide. Just to show a quick couple examples of the value we create through this circular economy, I have a farm that has been running our system since 2015. He wanted to double the herd size of his dairy without digging a new lagoon or adding more land. By installing our system, he has reduced his manure expenses, increased his feed crop production by precision applying his nutrients. He has improved his herd health by flushing the barns with clean water instead of lagoon water. And he has reduced his overall expenses on his farm. Plus, he is unlocking all the value that was trapped in his lagoon and is packaging and selling these fertilizers for additional revenue. He sells his Bucky Bloom product retail in store shelves and to greenhouses. He calls himself an entrepreneur. And of course, he has that clean water for recycling and reuse that you can see he and his son drinking here. That water is making a global impact. On our farm in Lebanon, where there has been a massive impact, we can see through the farm's excellent reuse of water and fertigation, completely transforming part of their land. Soil holds approximately 20,000 gallons more water per acre for every 1% of carbon that's added. So recycling that organic material back onto the land can greatly improve soil health. We've heard people today talk about regenerative agriculture, and this is an exact case of where that has been so impactful. Now we talk today about manure as nutrient and organic fertilizer and content for the circular economy. We talk about our farms as land for carbon sequestration. Globally, we are seeing so much momentum building with many green recovery plans worldwide. We were recently awarded a top spot on the Food Tech 500 list, number 31, which was the top spot for any Canadian company. This year, our farms are on pace to recycle 1 billion gallons of manure globally. Our challenge is to continue to show that we can create value from water treatment that feeds into the circular economy and into the economy that feeds all of us. In doing this, we can directly impact 10 of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, including access of women and girls to the agriculture economy and to clean water. Women and girls are the most heavily impacted by water impacts, by water pollution, and by lack of access to clean water. So it's very important for me as a female founder to focus on this goal as a benefit to women and girls worldwide. Thank you so much today for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions, and please reach out to connect. You can find me on LinkedIn or send me an email.
Thanks a lot, Karen, for a really insightful presentation. And I believe both water and manure are key for future of this world. And what else than agriculture to support it? For very simple reason, agriculture is the only activity which draws 70% of groundwater withdrawals, right? And if we are able to use water and reuse water, I'll say that, we would be in a safer hand and we would have a planet which is more sustainable. So thanks for sharing this beautiful concept and idea. My question is that how relevant your technology could be in developing world, especially Africa and Asia. I'll just give you an example of my own country, India. We are already having close to 300 million cattle, right? 150 million of them milch cattle, and the remaining 150 typically non-milch cattle. Now, do you see that such technologies would add a lot of value? Because unfortunately, the production of milk is low in our country, and that is putting a lot of stress on the farmers. And if we have this alternative RNG and manure as a revenue opportunity, that can be a huge benefit. So what's your views to deploy this technology in developing world?
It's really exciting for us right now, as we've seen different people from all over the world contact us and talk to us about, and teach us really about how we can apply our experience and our technology into various parts of the world. Very surprisingly, we've had calls from every country in the world contacting us through our website and through LinkedIn to engage with us and give us an indication of how this process can be used. What we're seeing in the developing world is around decentralizing energy production, where developing nations can produce their own energy locally and from their waste products. If we can be part of a recycling system that creates energy in every aspect of in every country of the world, as well as then afterwards creating clean water from that energy production, that really excites us to be part of a whole circular economy in every country. Recently, we've seen issues in China where there have been disease problems with respect to their hog herds, and that as well has broadened their look for where to grow their livestock into countries that hadn't traditionally grown livestock for China, which gives opportunity to different countries globally and in the developing countries to grow livestock, to sell that, export that into China. So as well, you know, we are seeing countries all over Russia and Eastern Europe, and then other developing countries looking to start livestock operations for export and to create better economy within their country. So if we can do that while allowing there to be clean water production, and then they can grow feed crops locally, I think decentralizing the food system in the world is just an exciting prospect for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen, a lot. It was a pleasure having you as a speaker. And offline, I'll touch base with you. We work in Africa and Asia extensively. So would love to explore where we can partner and bring this beautiful technology which save the earth, replenishing it with the better soil and water. Thanks, pleasure having you.
Thank you so much.
So now that brings us to the last section where we talk a little bit about initiatives of Honeybee. So Honeybee, we are a company which works on intersection of agriculture and technology. We are having 3 streams. One, we do farming. We work with all sort of different protocols of farming, from regenerative agriculture to conventional farming, helping the farmers, both the corporate, community farmers, ensure that they are more profitable in their activities. Second stream is where we bring beautiful technology, like as just we discussed with Karen, those technologies to developing world, specifically Africa and Asia, because we have extensive understanding of these economies, all the way from Ghana to Papua New Guinea. We understand Asia and Africa. The third stream is where we work with creating the ecosystem for agriculture with various parameters, including the today's session, which we are talking about, bringing the very pertinent issue of women in agriculture or lack of women in agriculture, and discuss about it with some of the awesome global change makers. I would like to end this session with one of the initiative which we are associated with. This is an initiative called Evolving Roots, where the idea is to use sustainable farming to grow superfood. And we are having 2 awesome founders Arjun and Rajvi, who are spear leading that. I would leave with you a video which will tell you a little bit more about this initiative.
Today, we humans are harming the healthy soil and its existence. We are wasting both food and water like never before. If we continue in our ways, what will we leave behind for our descendants? What will be our legacy? Our health is connected with the health of our planet. At Evolving Roots, our goal is to deliver safe and nutritious food with minimum impact on the environment by embracing farmer engagement, cutting-edge technology, a sustainable business model, and an impact-driven philosophy. In the next 5 years, we will scale to over 1,000 hectares of land spread across the globe, on which we will produce over 14,600 metric tons of superfoods. We will feed that to over 500,000 people every day. Sustainability, traceability, and transparency give hope and build trust. Through scientific practices and demand-driven cultivation, we seek out a scalable business model to increase profits by better ensuring that all the people can have access to nutritious food. Our focus is on the superfoods, and we have begun on that journey. Ginger, turmeric, and moringa are our first offerings. With sustainable practices and use of modern technology, we will gain efficiency in increasing crop yields, reducing soil loss, reducing food and water wastage, and improving livelihood for local farmers. We need to consider the people who are growing our food. Sustainability involves focusing on the well-being of ourselves, our families, and our farmers. We don't want to be the generation that lets it go. If in 100 years from now, this still exists, everybody wins, and that will be our legacy. Evolving Roots has given us an opportunity to evolve, and by doing so, be able to contribute and engage with the hearts and hands of those who explore the transformational potential of digital agriculture to feed the world in a way that delivers healthier people, healthier economies, and a healthier planet.
I have spent over 10+ years generating ideas in the field of fashion and food and beverage. I thrive on acting on consumer intent and creative execution. I have been fortunate to serve in roles that fulfill a multitude of diverse responsibilities. I think of my career in multi-layered chapters with pressing importance on diversified narratives that find a way to come full circle while teaching valuable lessons along the way. I have spent a decade building my career in fashion and apparel design, and then I stumbled upon food and beverage because I'm constantly trying to evolve myself and start a journey where I get to touch subjects from product conundrum to the never-ending game of factors influencing the food and beverage to the future of FMCG markets. For generations, agriculture was considered as a men's occupation. Women have been on the field sowing, harvesting, winnowing, and sorting for ages, and yet we never see or hear about them when we talk about agriculture. You have to search for them in books, art, and archives. Simply because they are women, their names are kept off from land documents. With no land to their name, women are completely at the mercy of their husbands or their family. 75% of the full-time workers on Indian farms are women. They plow the field and they feed the country as much as any other male farmer. Women who show up, who bring their full selves to the table and take up space, despite the legal rights, social and cultural forces deny women ownership of land. They constantly live in insecurity. I have heard countless stories of oppression and realized that women are the lowest of low in the pyramid of our social structure. My goal is to empower them and make them aware of what they bring to the table. Evolving Roots is into the business of progressive and sustainable agriculture. In Gujarat, we have already put up a fine infrastructure in place with the right kind of people, technology, and value system. Our goal is to deliver safe and nutritious food with minimum impact on environment by embracing farmer engagement, cutting-edge technology, sustainable business model, and an impact-driven investment philosophy. Currently, on a 20 hectare of land, we have begun sowing ginger, turmeric, and moringa. This is our demo farm, which we intend on duplicating. The idea is to scale this business to 1,000 hectares over the next 5 years and increase our basket of superfoods that we can offer. Through this, the aim is to produce 14,600 metric tons of superfood annually, with a goal of delivering to 500,000 people every day. Intensive agricultural methods have stripped increasing amounts of nutrients from the soil in which the food we eat grows. When it comes to the health benefits, some foods have more nutrition to offer than the regularly grown commodity foods. These are known as superfoods. Our focus lies only on growing superfoods that are packed in nutrition and has some that's rare to find in the modern diet. Nutrition and agriculture must work together. At Evolving Roots, our agriculture practices improve nutrition and outputs and create easier access to different types of superfoods. We focus on growing only nutrient-rich and diverse foods. Our concentration will remain on superfoods, and we shall be doing everything in a scientific manner in order to increase the yields while avoiding food and water wastage, since everything would be demand-based. Our produce will be 100% traceable. At Evolving Roots, we believe in the power of regeneration. The choices that we make around soil and food in the next 10 years will determine the next century of human civilization. Do we want a dry, rocky, eroded terrain, or a biodiverse ecosystem that produces nutritious and healthy humans? This is the question that we ask every day at Evolving Roots. From a layperson's point of view, the main concept behind regenerative agriculture is to support biodiversity within the soil. Keeping this in mind, we are empowering a new generation of farmers to approach agriculture as a key component of our efforts for sustainability. With this, we are beginning our journey keeping in mind the importance of soil health. Earth can thrive only when humanity finds balance with all living systems. Admiration and correspondence are the foundation of our relationship with our planet. Our engagement in ecosystem regeneration is restoring the health of the soil, the quality of nutrition, the conservation of water, atmosphere, and our communities. As a part of our top priority, both from a business and personal perspective, we intend to make sure that we adopt regenerative practices and make the farms and the ecosystem highly sustainable. We intend to get into partnerships with companies globally for buyback opportunities and intend on employing the best of technology. The precision and efficiency is key to making sure we produce more but with less resources. Lastly, we are now also seeking and welcoming investments into our project to help us scale faster while maintaining our focus. It shall ensure we are able to contribute in a larger way immediately towards our goal of a sustainable planet.
So with this, we come towards the end of the session. Thanks everyone for participation. And it was a great success. We had all the speakers since morning. And I thank my team at Honeybee who have been on their toes for past 16 hours, back to back, starting from early morning in Australia and towards the noon in the US and Canada. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. Goodbye.